West Denver. Sleep deprived and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't understand why this is an issue.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show.
It is 6 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Monday, April 21st, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710, KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights and hottest takes from the right, left, and center. We begin today's broadcast with breaking news and deep, saddening news from the Vatican. Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. The Holy Father died peacefully in the Vatican early this morning, surrounded by his closest aides and in the care of the medical team that had been monitoring his declining health in recent weeks. As the first Jesuit pope and the first from the Americas, Latin America, and the first to take the name Francis, inspired by St. Francis of Assisi, his papacy marked a historic and at times controversial chapter in the life of the Church. Elected in 2013 after the resignation of Pope Benedict, Francis served for over a decade championing causes like care for the poor, environmental stewardship, and global dialogue, even as he faced growing tension within the Church over doctrine, tradition, and modernity. His compassion was evident, and his calls for peace were frequent, and his presence on the world stage unmistakable. Today, more than 1.3 billion Catholics and countless others touched by his leadership joined together in mourning, remembering a man who sought to be, above all else, a servant. Over the next duration of the show, we'll take a look at his legacy, the impact of his teaching, what happens next in the Vatican as the world prepares for, you have to help me here, Bill, sede vacante.
Yeah, it's a vacancy.
The seat of Peter, now empty.
Yeah, it's basically a vacancy is what it's.
And the beginning of the next papal conclave.
Yeah, my Latin is still bad. It's still very bad.
Again, Pope Francis has died. He was 88 years old. Would love to hear from you, the impact he may have had on your faith, your thoughts about him, maybe your critique of him. Phone lines are open at 303-696-1971 or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. That's 720-819-5115. Bill, I apologize. I can't see the screen here.
Oh, you
but
can't.
I can touch it.
Okay. Oh, that's even better. Magical. What do you want to touch? That's a really weird question to be asking this time of the morning. Just saying. That's just very strange.
All right. I think I know where it is, but now is time for Blake Olson.
In West Denver.
Hey, nicely done.
Sleep deprived.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
38 and partly cloudy in Denver, expecting a high of 71 today. The 710 5-day forecast is coming up. As Jeff just mentioned, our top story, Pope Francis is dead at the age of 88.
The statement from Cardinal Kevin Farrell reads in part, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis. At 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and of his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with fidelity, courage, and universal love, especially in favor of the poorest and most marginalized." I'm Rory O'Neill.
Thanks, Rory. The passing of Pope Francis means it's time to choose a new pontiff, and with that comes plenty of speculation. While any baptized Roman Catholic male can technically be elected as pontiff, the Pope has traditionally been chosen from the College of Cardinals since the 14th century. Authorities investigating a deadly shooting in Wheat Ridge that happened Sunday afternoon around 3:30 in the 3900 block of Sheridan. One person was reportedly in custody following the shooting. Multiple agencies are assisting with the investigation, including Denver Police and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. Last night, 47 posted something that Matt Walsh wrote, which said, quote, the left says that federal judges have the unilateral authority to overrule anything Trump does and to override any policy he puts in place. This very clearly means that the judiciary is a superior and more powerful branch of government. But that is not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says the branches are equal, which means that judges do not have the authority to override Trump whenever they feel like it. DJT posted that once again on Truth Social, and he is correct. Now, the hundreds of protesters in Denver and across Colorado believe that government and court is God. They were at the Capitol and several other locations across the state, once again protesting and promoting violence on DJT. Protesters held signs showing opposition to federal workers losing their jobs and its immigration policies. The truth is, they really don't understand much. They drop a lot of F-bombs. They show assassination signs, sport cross-dressing gear, and wear beekeeper masks. They all scream fascism every 5 seconds, and it's fun stuff. You can see it on Jeff's video once again this weekend on X. An alleged threat is closing 3 schools today. That's a threat, not a thread. Today in Pueblo West. A Pueblo County Sheriff's spokesperson says the threat came Sunday by email involving Pueblo School District 70. The sheriff ensures that the community, that more resources will be sent, securing all schools during this time. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has reportedly shared more detailed military plans across the second group of chat in the Signal app, this time with members of his family. Multiple outlets say that they've been told by sources that Hegseth shared the military plans regarding an operation against the Houthis in Yemen that went very well. So we'll keep an eye on that. The left will talk about that a lot, I'm sure, today. Charlie Kirk on Bill Maher on Friday. Kirk with the dope smoker.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
You don't drink?
No.
Or smoke pot?
No.
And you're married and super Christian. We're going to get along great.
You know, this is going to just be perfect.
But can I just ask you, because I want to find out a lot about you, because you're obviously a super bright guy, but you do think that I have the right to live completely opposite than you do.
I think you can get as drunk as you'd like.
And you're that kind of an American, right? You're not forcing your opinions as.
I'm not here to say you can't. What are you talking about?
No, okay. So you think pot should be legal?
It always comes back to that. Whatever. Just smoke your pot in your house. Just don't drive and endanger everyone else or get drunk. Whatever you want, Bill, you clown. Just vote the correct way. Can you learn something once in your life? News brought to you by Lair Fireplace and Patio, Denver's premier source for everything fireplace, patio, and grills, locally owned and operated since 1954, online at lairfireplacepatio.com. Nuggets and the Clippers tonight at Lodo, downtown at the arena. Tip off at 8. Nuggets lead the opening round series 1-0. Avalanche and Stars tonight also at 7:30. They lead Dallas in the opening round as well, 1-0. 36 in Westminster, and it is 37 in Lone Tree, 38 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue Monday morning.
Balake. Where is Balake at? Yes, sir.
My name is Blake.
Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The low 70s this afternoon. A few clouds tonight, lows in the lower 40s. For your Tuesday, early sunshine with a chance for afternoon showers, highs near 70. Overnight lows in the lower 40s. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. I'm meteorologist Patrice Sutter in the 710 KNUS Weather Center. Your 710 5-day forecast here in Denver.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We've got a lot to cover this morning. In a rare overnight decision, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a 7-2 ruling early Saturday morning to temporarily halt the Trump administration's deportation of Venezuelan detainees from the Bluebonnet Detention Center in Texas. Bluebonnet. Swing by and grab some ice cream. The administration has invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to expedite removals, alleging detainees' ties to the Tren de Aragua gang. The ACLU challenged this move, citing violations of due process. Justice Samuel Alito, joined by Justice Clarence Thomas, dissented, criticizing the court's swift action without full briefing. Justice Samuel Alito issued a sharp dissent regarding the U.S. Supreme Court's recent decision to temporarily halt the Trump administration's deportation of Venezuelan detainees, citing the court's actions as hastily and prematurely granted, emphasizing that it was issued, quote, literally in the middle of the night, unquote, without sufficient explanation or input from the government. Joining us to provide some assessment on this is probably the best legal mind I know, and that's Chris Murray. Always grateful to have you in studio, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here, and good for you for not knowing too many lawyers, Jeff.
I know a great one, but you are out there fighting with First and 14th, doing great work around constitutional law. So, give me some insight on this.
I mean, all right. So there ain't, right now, too much insight to be gleaned, because for the benefit of your audience, a lot of times when you guys have me on here to talk about something out of the Supreme Court or one of the courts of appeals, we've got, an opinion, right? Something where the justices lay out their thinking, they attack each other's lines of thinking or criticize each other's lines of thinking, and we can go into that. Here, what we've got is literally an order that is, 5 sentences long, okay? And the 5th sentence is Justice Thomas and Justice Alito dissent from the court's order. Sorry, I apologize, 6 sentences, because the 6th sentence is statement from Justice Alito to follow, period, right? This is issued at 1 a.m. on a Saturday, okay? It's highly unusual. What it says is there will be no deportations under the Alien and Enemies Act for the putative class of people that has now filed to stop removal in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the Court of Appeals that covers the part of Texas in which these folks are being detained. So the order says you can't remove anybody until the United States Supreme Court says further, and that's all we've got. We know that Justice Alito is going to issue a dissent at some point, probably early this week. Yeah.
And Alito expressed frustration over the fact that this was put out literally in the middle of the night, that this was hastily and prematurely granted. He seems to get frustrated about the process here, that it kind of seemed to jump up to the Supreme Court relatively quickly. Amy Coney Barrett has expressed that frustration on some of these cases too, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, look, so Justice Barrett has been a consistent critic of what's called the shadow docket, right? This emergency docket, making big decisions in the middle of the night, right, on very, very short time frames with very little underdeveloped briefing. I'll say this order shouldn't be a huge surprise, right? I've been on your show a couple times recently. We've been talking about this Alien Enemies Act issue, right? Remember, a couple weeks ago, we had a D.C. District Court judge who tried to stop any deportation anywhere in the country, right, under the Alien Enemies Act. And back then I said, hey, look, wrong court. The people who are detained aren't in the District of Columbia. They need to sue where they're being detained for a petition for writ of habeas corpus, right? Now a bunch of these folks have done that, and they're trying to organize as a class, right? And I think, to be perfectly candid, after President Trump's news conference with the president of El Salvador, where they, kind of played the if you've been to like an Avs game, right? Like where's the wrench in the Applewood plumbing truck or whatever? There you go, Applewood plumbing. That you knew that was worth it, right? It's like it's the same thing. Like, hey, where are the prisoners, right? Oh boy, I don't know if I'll be able to get that one back for you or not. I think this is the Supreme Court calling the president's bluff.
Okay, so the president has declared the Alien Enemies Act 1798, saying that because these, not all legal immigrants, but these particular ones that are associated with gang activity and cartel activity are operating as enemies of the United States. They've done an incursion into the United States with their cartel activity.
Yep.
And in fact, they're killing more people than anybody else we've gone to war with in the last 100 years. So
through the drug trade. Yep.
Yeah, through the drug trade. So we need to treat them seriously. Now, the president could just put them through a traditional process of deportation, these guys, and just go, we're going to have a court hearing and you're going to leave and all that stuff. But the Alien Enemies Act allows him to get them out of here quicker.
Right.
And so he feels he has the duty as the president of the United States to do this to protect the American people. The fallback being, all right, we've just got to take a longer process to get these guys out, right?
I mean, that's right. And look, like, all this does is allow for, I should remind your listeners or let your listeners know what stage of the process we're at here. There was an emergency motion filed to the Supreme Court Friday night by the lawyers for these men who they say are subject to imminent deportation, right? They already had an emergency motion on file to stop it with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals when they went to the Supreme Court. The Fifth Circuit hadn't even ruled yet, but they said, shoot, it's the weekend, and we're worried that the Fifth Circuit, which is very conservative, is going to deny our request. And then over the weekend, the planes are going to El Salvador, and we just learned from this news conference what happens once you go to El Salvador. You don't come back, right? No matter what. Like, a court can say you need to come back, and you don't come back. So Supreme Court, please put something in place while you wait for the briefing from the federal government on our motion. If the Fifth Circuit denies this, by the way, they were right. The Fifth Circuit denied their request like in the middle of the night on Friday, right? And so they were probably right to file this because I think without this order, it's highly likely there would have been some flights to El Salvador over the weekend.
Yeah. That voice you're hearing is Chris Murray's with First and 14th Law. We're talking about the U.S. Supreme Court issuing a 7-2 ruling early Saturday morning to temporarily halt the Trump administration's deportation of Venezuelan detainees from the Bluebonnet Detention Center in Texas. So what's going to happen today? What do we expect the Trump administration to do to respond?
Well, so the Supreme Court ordered John Sauer, that's the new Solicitor General, actually a law school classmate of mine, to file a response to the motion with the Supreme Court as soon as possible. You could expect that the Solicitor General's office, I would expect they'll file something today. If not today, there's actually several oral arguments at the Supreme Court, so it might be tomorrow. Including the Solicitor General's office, I think, has 3 cases they're arguing today. So they might file something tomorrow, and then you can expect an updated order from the Supreme Court, either granting or denying this motion for stay. So either saying, yep, don't deport anybody for now, or never mind, actually go ahead and let's let the process play out in the lower courts. I would expect another order from the Supreme Court likely this week or next week.
Yeah. And what's your gut tell you? Do you think it goes the...
My gut tells me that there are, the order tells me there's at least 7 justices that are concerned about, hey, even if these guys are dead wrong, right? Even if the law here is really bad, if they get sent out of the country, there's going to be no ability for the courts to review these questions. And maybe it's better for all of us to just hold them here and order the lower courts to do this as quickly as possible, right, so that the courts can weigh in before there's deportation flights here. So my gut tells me they probably get some kind of a stay. I'm betting it's probably on a less than 7-2 margin.
Interesting. Now, this stay is specific to the Alien Enemies Act, so
right.
at some point, somebody's got to weigh in and just go, yeah, the president has the right to declare these folks an illegal incursion into the United States and
right.
get them out,
right?
Or he doesn't. or he got this wrong, and this is by definition doesn't fall under the incursion clause.
Eventually, this comes back to the question that we've talked about a couple times,
Right.
which is, hey, look, we know there's not a declared war, right? So is Tren de Aragua committing an invasion, right, or a predatory incursion into the United States? We know the president has declared that's the case, so that's the question, and that's the question that courts are. I think the one question the courts on the merits have the ability to answer is, what is that thing? What's an invasion? What's a predatory incursion? Eventually, the Supreme Court's going to have to rule on that. Do I think that they're going to rule on that in the context of this super fast motion? No. What I do think they might do is say, hold up on the deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. Let's let the Texas court make the first decision on this, right? Is it a predatory incursion? Is it an invasion? Can the president do this? Let's let the Fifth Circuit go after that, and eventually, in about a year, it'll be up here.
Now, Chris Murray with First and 14th, joining Jeff and Bill live. In your opinion, how much does the case of Mr. Garcia out of Maryland impact the Supreme's eventual tactics on this one? And what I'm saying is the idea of, he said that the court recently had said they needed to facilitate bringing Garcia back, and the administration went, up, no can do, and El Salvador said, nope, no can do. So somehow both parties involved say neither one of them have any ability to bring him back. How does that impact the Supreme's decision, in your opinion, going forward?
So I'll be perfectly candid. I think if and I'm not actually trying to say what's possible with the president of El Salvador and what's not, right? But if that had gone differently, if the Supreme Court ordered that, and he's not really a Maryland man, by the way. This guy had like a valid deportation order, okay? But if the administration had gone to President Bukele of El Salvador and said, hey, bring him back, let him out, we want him back, and he had come back, I don't think you get this order on Saturday morning at 1 a.m.
That's my feeling.
I think this is the Supreme Court saying, okay, you want to play that game, right? Now we're going to give you an order that we know you absolutely have the ability, right, to enforce, and let's see if you want to defy us on that.
Yeah, I think that the play of, well, once they've crossed the border, we've washed our hands, we can't do anything with them, tells the courts you have to do everything to prevent anything from before crossing the border. They've focused it internally, since you can't bring the people back once they're external to the nation. So they have to do everything to stop the pre-deportation, because the current administration has said, once deported, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, again, I think if that fella had come back because the Supreme Court issued, I think, a 9-0 order saying that his return ought to be facilitated. If he would have come back, I don't think this order gets issued.
Yeah. That's Chris Murray from First and 14th Law. Now, the administration has said, okay, we've abide by it. There's a plane ready to go. As soon as El Salvador is ready to release him, all right, we'll bring him back.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and again, like, that's why I said I don't know if President Bukele may well be saying to President Trump, hey, man, no way, I'm not letting this guy out. I just think that at the Supreme Court, what they're telling you with this order, we don't believe you, right? We believe that if President Trump really said to President Bukele, hey, man, do me a solid, let that guy out and take him over to the airport, we do have the plane waiting, we want to bring him back, that he would do it. That may not be the case, right? That very well may not be the case. And the Supreme Court is acknowledging we can't prove it one way or another, but that is out of our jurisdiction. So congratulations. Now we're stopping the entire class from being removed for a period of time.
That voice is Chris Murray, is one of the partners at First and 14th Law. We're talking about the emergency, the rare overnight decision. I don't know if it's emergency, but U.S. Supreme Court issued a 7-2 ruling early Saturday morning to temporarily halt the Trump administration's deportation of Venezuelan detainees from the Bluebonnet Detention Center in Texas. Let's go to the phone lines. Tim in Littleton. Good morning, Tim. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
Morning, Jeff. Morning, Bill. Hey, guys, can someone explain to me how these individuals that come here illegally have the same constitutional right as you and I? It makes no sense to me. No other country in the world that I know of does this, and it is strictly political chess move to further someone else's agenda regarding
Tim, that is a hot question right now. Chris Murray.
Yeah, I mean, so the truth is that folks who come into the country illegally don't have every constitutional right that you and I have, Tim. But one of the rights that they have been given, and it's mainly been given prudentially by courts, is, hey, if you say that you're not here illegally, right? You say, no, well, hold on a second, like this guy in Maryland. I'm just a Maryland man. I'm not a member of MS-13. I swear, and I can prove it, right? The courts will say, we'll give you your day in court to try and prove it, right? Now, where does that lead us, right? That leads us to, as I think you point out with your question, Tim, right? Sometimes long and interminable and frustrating legal proceedings, right? But I would say think about the opposite. Right. Imagine the situation where, hey, you get rounded up with a bunch of other folks. Say, no, I'm a U.S. citizen. I swear to you, like I'm not like the rest of these other 99 guys. Right. Say, sorry, man, we got you in a deportation roundup. No court for you. Right. That'd be a pretty convenient thing, right, for somebody who wants to get rid of somebody to have the power to do that. And our court said a long, long time ago, like, no. If you get a chance to darken our door, right, because that's part of the check of the power on the executive. It's part of the check on the power of the Congress.
Yeah, and the other one, Tim, would be the idea of because you are in the country illegally, you don't necessarily have zero rights at all. You couldn't be stopped for speeding by a Denver cop, and then the cop determines that you're in the country illegally, and he shoots you in the head. That because you have no rights. That would be, again, it's an extreme example, very unlikely to happen. But if you have no rights, once they determine you're in the country illegally, no holds barred. They can kill you because there would be no necessary consequence. The cop didn't stop someone that was a citizen. The cop didn't do anything wrong. The person that he stopped had no rights. So that's kind of the question you have inside of there. And Chris is right. Yeah, as far as there are some boundaries on what rights we give people that are in the country illegally, but they do have rights.
Any follow-up question, Tim?
Well, it seems that both political sides are playing chess pieces, and people are being pawns.
Oh yes.
Well, Tim, and I'll point this out. I went down.
Question. That's true.
Yeah,
yes,
I went down to the anti-Trump protest on Saturday, and I just had one question because everybody had these signs that said "due process, due process, due process," and they were screaming about it. And I go, "Okay, I understand you're concerned about due process. You seem really, really focused on process in this case of how we deport somebody. What about the process of how they got here in the first place? You didn't seem that concerned about the process then." And they stopped talking to me. So, Tim, to your point, sometimes we become pawns. Thanks so much for the call. By the way, Tim's line is open 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971. So, Chris Murray, the fallback position is, okay, we just got to go through the process.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no perfect way to do this. I mean, should the process be faster? Yes. And I think that, look, by all indications, the Texas District Court is going to move this along very, very quickly, right? Now, that said, when a lawyer says very, very quickly, like a bunch of people like rightly cringe, like, oh, so months maybe, not years, right? And that's true, right? A process to figure out like, hey, look, we've never answered this legal question before, right? It does take time for people to write down arguments on that and for a judge to decide something in a way that he or she thinks is going to hold up in front of a court of appeals so that they're not embarrassed later. It does take a little bit of time. The good thing about it is why do we have that process, right? Because why do judges bother writing things down? Well, so that we can look at what they said and decide whether or not we think that makes sense, right? And we can say, okay, looks like those people got their due process. Now the law can operate the way it's supposed to.
What about the idea that the process has already taken place? This guy from Maryland has a deportation order.
So I actually think that is a great point. My understanding of this class is that
different.
It's different.
Yeah.
In this class, there are some people who already have a valid judicial deportation order, right? that's why I would bet the Supreme Court is going to amend this order at some point. All right?
Yeah.
But the people who don't have a valid deportation order who are included in this class, that's the magic part of this class that is doing all the work right now that has the Supreme Court concerned about it. Like, okay, if you've got a valid deportation order, honestly, who cares why you're being deported? You were supposed to be out of the country years ago in most cases. But if you don't, and there's a speedy secret Easter Eve plane headed down to El Salvador on a Saturday night, right? And there's no due process for you after that. I think a lot of people are justifiably concerned about that.
Now, Chris Murray with First and 14th Law, joining Jeff and Bill live. How much, in your opinion, is the issue over Garcia, the suspected MS-13 gang member out of Maryland, now in El Salvador, how much of this could have been avoided? It's a better question. How much of this could have been avoided if the Trump administration would have deported him anywhere else, because he had a valid deportation order, but it prevented deportation to El Salvador? The Trump administration chose the only country they technically couldn't send it to, and they sent him there. How much of this is them stepping on a legal rake in some manner?
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, the stepping on a legal rake, I think, is the perfect analogy. I think.
Thank you.
Either you bring him back. If he would have been brought back, you don't get this order. If he would have been deported somewhere else, you don't get this order. And look, this happens. Haste makes mistakes, right? It just does. And you can agree with the haste of these deportations. You can say this should have happened yesterday. Fine. Right? But we all know, we've all done this. Even when you're doing something that really needed to be done yesterday and you're moving quickly because of that, sometimes you screw up a little bit in the middle of it, right? And by all accounts, this is maybe the one screw up in those first 3 plane loads of folks, right? That's actually a pretty darn good job. But of course, to your caller's point a minute ago, right? These folks are being used as pawns by political adversaries. Well, the left found the one mistake, and I think. Do
you think it was a mistake? I don't think it was a mistake.
I think that he was deported to El Salvador. Yes, I think that's
where he's from.
Well, correct, right? But there was an order saying that he can't be deported to El Salvador, right? Yeah. His order of deportation said, right, he can go anywhere but El Salvador.
Yeah, they could have taken him to Mexico, Colombia, anywhere else, and it would have been okay.
The administration's lawyers will never say this, but I would bet dollars to donuts, right? If they had just a little bit more time and they would have caught this, they would have been like, all right, weed him out, not because they're sympathetic to him.
Right. No, but this guy shouldn't be in America.
But just to avoid this challenge, they would have done that.
Wow. All right, that's Chris Murray. You're hearing from First and 14th. We'll get to Tony here in a second. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Early Saturday morning in a 7-2 ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court temporarily halted the Trump administration's deportation of Venezuelan detainees from the Bluebonnet Detention Center in Texas. The administration had invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to expedite removals, alleging detainees' ties to the Tren de Aragua gang. The ACLU challenged this move, citing violations of due process. Justice Samuel Alito, joined by Justice Clarence Thomas, dissented, criticizing the court's swift action without full briefing. Joining us live in studio is Chris Murray with First and 14th, great constitutional law expert. Let's go to the phone lines. Tony in Littleton. Good morning, Tony. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. I have two questions. If I get the second one, great. Chris, there's a lot of discussion from Republican analysts and Democratic analysts talking about the idea that if the president chooses to ignore decisions by any court, but especially the Supreme Court, we would find ourselves in a constitutional crisis. And the example that they give is even Nixon, when he was ordered to release those tapes that he knew would sink his presidency, he released them in 12 days and resigned. Where do you stand as an attorney, an expert in this field? How do you read that?
So I think you're right. If you've got a president who defies court orders, especially an order of the U.S. Supreme Court, if that were to happen, then you do have a constitutional crisis because, and by the way, this has happened before, students of history will know that President Andrew Jackson, when the Supreme Court ruled, hey, look, like you can't relocate the Seminole tribe from Florida, right? That's the Trail of Tears. Like you're not allowed to do that, right? What did President Jackson say? Well, the Chief Justice has made his order. Now let him enforce it, right? And he did it anyway, right? That was a constitutional crisis, and it was appreciated as one at the time. Although a lot of people, and there's some parallels, right? A lot of people sort of hand-waved at it and said, I mean, it's just, and please forgive me. I'm putting myself in the mind of an early 19th century American here. Oh, it's just a bunch of Indians. Like, it's not that big a deal, right? Well, it was a big deal. And, I think in fairness to folks who are concerned about this, I think the Trump administration is going to follow this order, by the way. But in fairness to folks who are concerned about this, who, as Trump said, is his favorite president? Andrew Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Jackson.
Right.
So I mean, that is a problem. If you've got one branch of the government defying court orders, right, that is a problem. I will also say, if you've got courts issuing orders that they've got no business issuing, especially nationwide injunctions from district court judges exceeding their jurisdiction, like Boasberg and the D.C. District Court did a few weeks ago, that also creates a crisis of constitutional legitimacy for the courts. So it cuts both ways.
Yeah, and along those lines, it's my understanding the most the courts can really do is hold the players in contempt. They can hold them in contempt. But the real solution to that is that would fall back to Congress to impeach, and that's really the process to hold a president accountable. Is that right? I mean, there's really not much more that can be done. Is that right?
That's right. And by the way, so as my hobby horse has been for a long time, Jeff knows this off air. What is supposed to be the most powerful branch in our government? I'll give you a clue. It gets the first article in the Constitution, Congress. Congress is supposed to be the most powerful branch in our government. And the reason why, and this goes way beyond Donald Trump, this goes way beyond left and right. The reason that we keep having these crises between liberal administration, conservative courts, conservative administration, liberal courts, them bashing heads is because Congress is sitting over in a corner with its head down saying, please vote for us, just kind of forget we're here. The founders did not anticipate that kind of lack of leadership out of our out of Congress, and that's out of both parties. And until Congress starts standing up for its prerogatives, this gets worse, not better.
Tony, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Tony's line will be open 303-696-1971. Chris, we only got about 60 seconds left. Quick thoughts on the passing of Pope Francis.
And that's, that was, you told me, I mean, I believe it or not, I don't get on the news before I come over here at 5:45 in the morning. So you were the one who told me. It's a shock. I'm a Catholic. He was the Holy Father. He's the leader of the church. Hate to see him go. It seemed like he was suffering, and so I'm sure everybody can agree that we're happy that that's over for him. It's now the church has got to pick a new leader, and I would ask all your listeners, whether they're Catholic or not, right, to pray for the Catholic Church that the next leader is prepared to step into a void and is prepared to lead the church where it desperately needs some leading. As we are going to be looking at the Council of Cardinals, College of Cardinals, that's going to be voting on this, do you have any front runners you think that may emerge? Oh man, I mean, I know a little bit about the Constitution, but I mean the College of Cardinals. You want to talk about something that is like totally impregnable to somebody on the outside. So I would not even hazard a guess. I would just hope that whoever is chosen, that they have a rich and deep prayer life, and that their relationship with Jesus Christ is personal and strong, because they are going to need it. That's Chris Murray with First and 14th Law. Thanks so much for taking time on an early Monday morning to help us understand what happened over the weekend with the Supreme Court. Anything for this delicious styrofoam cup coffee that you guys provide. So.
It is for radio station coffee. It's one of the best. But again, we got to start with radio station coffee.
You should, Bill, I can see the KNUS T-shirts now.
Yes, exactly. Actually, we strained the coffee through an old KNUS T-shirt.
Oh, thank you so much, Christopher. We got You Choose the News. Coming up, you're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. It's that time in the morning that we give the people what they really want. You choose the news.
Yes, after a long weekend, we're going to start your Monday with a little bit of silliness and frivolity, something we call You Choose the News. This is what happens when Jeff and I are left unsupervised. Yeah, nobody in charge has any idea we are being this irresponsible with valuable airtime and playing this ridiculous fake radio news game show, but it has slowly become America's favorite fake radio news game show, because it's the only fake news radio game show we know being played across the country. So it's not much competition, which we appreciate. Alrighty. Now, you know how this goes. I go through really weird stories about us humans, pick a few of them, give them even dumber headlines so that we can play this silly game while nobody is watching or listening. Alrighty. Gentlemen, Blake Olson joining us from the news department. Jeff Hunt in the studio, sir. Here are the choices. Headline number 1, 50 minus 1. Headline number 2, childhood fear comes to life. Headline number 3, are you sure it's not Denver? And headline number 4, the past is the past. Mr. Hunt.
Let's do the childhood fear, please.
Yes, a childhood fear coming to life. Recently, that was the case for Mitchell O'Brien and Breanne Sicca. They were hunting for Leland bluestones and planning to catch the sunset over Lake Michigan recently when one of Mitchell's childhood fears came to life. You know, it's one of those fears you have as a kid that you thought would be a much bigger deal reading all the comic books and all the stories and stuff, but then you get to be an adult and you're like, oh, guess I don't necessarily have to be afraid of quicksand. But Mitchell should have been. As they were going along the edge of Lake Michigan, he got caught in quicksand all of a sudden up to his waist and needed help before he sunk underneath and was lost forever. Or went, through a time portal and went back in time or something, but I don't know. It's how it happens. So also, here's the idea, is basically the two were hunting for a special blue slag that washes up on the shoreline. They encountered a large pipe that was snaking across the beach. It was spewing slurry from a hydraulic dredge that was vacuuming sand from the harbor bottom. The machine actually creates an outwash at the end of the pipe, and that's where the quicksand was created. So when they walked by it, he got sucked in to the quicksand. Yeah. So a little bit of sciencey stuff. But yeah.
And you
quicksand.
stop moving.
Yes.
And then Indiana Jones throws you a whip.
Yes, exactly.
And pulls you out.
Yeah, but they had to get a cruise to get there to pull him out. Yeah.
Really?
With ropes. Yes. Yeah, couldn't be done by just his lovely partner. So yeah, unfortunately. But yes, quicksand come to life, and I'm now double scared. Okay. Blake Olson.
Same here.
I know. I was always scared of quicksand as a kid.
I
kept thinking about how do I do it if I encounter quicksand? You'd think from all the stuff we read as kids that it would be like everywhere, but no, never.
Yes.
Alrighty. 50 minus 1. Are you sure it's not Denver, or the past is the past?
Are you sure it's not Denver?
Yeah, are you sure it's not Denver? A Southern California mayor is facing recall after a suggestion about homelessness in his city. Longtime Lancaster Mayor Rex Paris is facing a possible recall or even some other problems. Once he said, well, the thing with the homeless is we just need to give them more fentanyl. Yes.
Yeah,
during
it's
a
Denver.
during a recent meeting at a speaker during a public comment portion, they were talking to him about homelessness within the city, and he basically said, well, I want to give them free fentanyl. That's what I want to do. I think they should have more fentanyl. I want to give them as much fentanyl as they want.
Wow.
Yeah, obviously some of the people that supported him in the last election have a lot of questions about handing out the free fentanyl, and so yes, of all the things in public to mention, you're like, I know.
People are out of their
I know.
minds.
It's just absolutely crazy.
It's like they're high on fentanyl.
It's just
or
ridiculous. Maybe that's the reason he wants to give the free one. He's like,
that's
do you
right.
understand how much money I can make if we start subsidizing this?
Right, exactly. Right. Come
Yes.
on, this is a great business opportunity.
I know.
What are you doing to me?
What are you doing? You're going to
I'm
cut
a
my
federal
overhead.
employee.
Paging
Yes.
Stephen Tubbs and the DEA.
Yes, exactly. Alrighty. Jeff Hunt, final choice. 50 minus 1 or the past is the past?
The past is the past.
The past is the past. The Mississippi Board of Education has voted to make sure that they are going to take public comment onto whether or not the high school graduation requirements should include U.S. history. Yes, they are debating because scores have been so low to just stop judging for U.S. history competency at the end of graduation.
Oh,
so
yeah,
Can you
cares?
fog a mirror?
That's going to help a lot.
Now you get to graduate.
Yeah. And that's in Mississippi.
Congratulations.
They're already doing so well in education. All right.
Yes,
back to you, sir. That's the end of You Choose the News.
All right, we'll continue with our coverage of the passing of Pope Francis. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is 710 CAN-US.
It is 7 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Monday, April 21st, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710 KNUS. We're beginning our show this morning with some breaking and deeply saddening news coming from the Vatican. Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. The Holy Father died peacefully in the Vatican early this morning, surrounded by his closest aides and in the care of the medical team that had been monitoring his declining health in recent weeks. As the first Jesuit pope, the first from the Americas, Latin America, and the first to take the name Francis, inspired by St. Francis of Assisi, his papacy marked a historic and at times controversial chapter in the life of the church. Elected in 2013 at the resignation of Pope Benedict, Francis served for over a decade championing causes like care for the poor, environmental stewardship, and global dialogue, even as he faced growing tensions within the church over doctrine, tradition, and modernity. His compassion was evident, his calls for peace were frequent, and his presence on the world stage unmistakable. Today, more than 1.3 billion Roman Catholics and countless others touched by his leadership join together in mourning and remembering a man who sought to be, above all else, a servant. We'll take a look at his legacy, the impact of his teachings, and what happens next in the Vatican as the world prepares for the seat of Peter, now empty, and the beginning of the next papal conclave. Again, Pope Francis has died. He was 88 years old. Let's go into more news with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good Monday morning, 39 and partly cloudy in Denver, expecting a high of 71 today. The 7-10 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story.
The statement from Cardinal Kevin Farrell reads in part, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis."
Pope Francis is dead at the age of 88, as Jeff just mentioned. His death was announced this morning in a short statement from the Vatican. Tributes are pouring in for Pope Francis. Vice President J.D. Vance, who met with Francis at the Vatican just a few hours before he died, actually, on Easter Sunday, said his heart goes out to everyone who loved him. Also reacting to the news, the White House posted on X, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis." The U.S. Supreme Court issued a 7-2 ruling early Saturday morning to temporarily prevent the DJT administration from deporting Venezuelan detainees in Tejas. Chris Murray, First and 14th Law, in the studio with Jeff and Bill last hour. Will we find out more today?
The Supreme Court ordered John Sauer, that's the new Solicitor General, actually a law school classmate of mine, to file a response to the motion with the Supreme Court as soon as possible. You could expect that the Solicitor General's office, I would expect they'll file something today. If not today, there's actually several oral arguments at the Supreme Court, so it might be tomorrow. Included the Solicitor General's office, I think, has 3 cases they're arguing today.
And Tom Holman over the weekend on the Tube talking about Senator Van Hollen sitting down with a pretty plaid shirt wearing Kansas City Chief fan Mr. Garcia, your kind of next door neighbor that you love who grills every weekend.
What bothers me more than that is a U.S. Senator traveled El Salvador on taxpayer dime to meet with an MS-13 gang member, public safety threat terrorist. I mean, in the meantime, the day before he traveled, an illegal alien was arrested for murder, were released to the streets rather than honoring an ICE detainer in his very own state. What concerns me is Van Hollen never went to the border the last 4 years on Joe Biden when he had a 600% increase in sex trafficking in women and children. You have a record number of no-inspected terrorists crossing that border. You had 250,000 Americans die from fentanyl overdose because of the open border. You got over 4,000 illegal aliens died making that journey, which is a historic record. What shocks me is he's remained silent on the travesty that happened on our southern border. Many people died. Thousands of people died. I met with hundreds of angel moms and dads who buried their children that were murdered by illegal alien. How many angel moms and dads has he met in the state of Maryland? That's what concerns me.
Great point. Well, he's not a Chiefs fan, by the way, but they had him wear a hat that happened to be a Chiefs hat. But he does like the Bulls. Because MS-13 knows if you wear a red and black Bulls hat, you're one of them.
Well, and the senator was claiming that the margaritas were a setup.
Yeah.
Did you see that
I
on
saw
Face of the
that.
Nation?
Yeah, a pretty good setup. Wonder how they tasted. I guess Bekele placed him there. He didn't know what. Yeah,
I was down at the anti-Trump protest on Saturday.
I saw that great video, by the way. Again,
it's the same stuff over and over again at this point.
Beekeeper hat, man.
Oh, I know, the federal employee.
Yes. You got to see, if you're listening right now, you got to see this video, because this is a federal employee. She has her head covered in blood. And she tells Jeff, I'm a federal employee, and I'm afraid I'm about to lose my job. And I'm thinking, that is all I needed to see and hear there.
And then I'm like, well, what do you want? And she's like, well, I want safety, food, and water for all people. I'm like, okay, well, we have that. We have a welfare state. No, is there anyone without water in America? What are you talking about? And then she's like, well, there's roaming gangs of MAGA supporters beating up people. And I'm like, oh,
wow.
Maybe it's my civic duty to remove the mask that she's wearing at this point so she can be terminated, because she's got to be one of the dopiest people I've ever met.
Oh, there's no doubt. And then my friend, I sent that to him. They were all laughing, and they're like, that's called a maskie, I guess, or something like that. And they sell those things. She's wearing this thing.
It's for beekeeping, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like it, but I guess people are walking around with these things, and they're not even Muslim, I mean,
it's everybody. There's so many people that have their faces covered down there.
Yes.
And it's the most bizarre experience, because if you go to the March for Life, where the folks have literally zero control in the state, and have every policy agenda they've ever wanted to pass shut down in the state, right? So, I mean, we're a radical pro-abortion state. So you go to the March for Life, and you're around everybody, and they're super happy. They're cheery. They're nice. They're kind. They're just the nicest people out there.
Clean.
Nobody's covering their faces.
No.
And then you go to this anti-Trump protest where they have all the power in the state of Colorado.
Yes.
They're covering their faces. They're just bitter and angry people. It is the most bizarre. I just encourage people to go see it, because you see there's a clear distinction in the type of people that show up at these events.
I mean, if you're on the fence and you don't even know anything about politics or what's happening in the world, seriously, if you listen to these of that side that you get, and then the other side, like you said, the pro-life, just for 2 minutes, how can you even choose to be on this side? These people have guillotine posters and calling for the assassination of
they got a pinata.
The pinata.
By the way, can you imagine the media coverage if we had a pinata? I think somebody did at one point. Wasn't there an old Barack Obama pinata, and the whole world went crazy over it? Violence.
Absolutely.
You're calling for violence, and these people are just. They got a Donald Trump. They're collecting donations for a Donald Trump pinata.
Yeah.
And then I asked them, "Are you calling for violence?" No. I'm like, so taking a baseball bat and beating a pinata of Donald Trump, you don't think it's violent? No.
Of course not. It's amazing, but it's a must-see. Once again, you're doing a great job down there. I mean, you got to really take some disinfectant after you leave there. My goodness. Charlie Kirk was on with Bill Maher talking about gangs over the weekend.
I mean, how is MS-13 not a terrorist organization?
Yeah,
I mean,
you can make
or
that.
Tren de Aragua. I mean,
organized because terrorism really is a political movement. It's It means terrorizing the civilian population to achieve a political goal. These guys just want to grab your locket. You know, this is...
It's a little more than that.
Oh, yeah, a lot more than that.
Yeah, a lot more, because the drug cartels, they run Mexico, with the exception of maybe Mexico City, maybe, I don't know, 2-mile radius, but that's not political. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has reportedly shared some detailed military plans across a second group chat in the Signal app, this time with members of his family. That's the next story the drive-by media is going to latch onto for at least a week. The international courier firm DHL Express is suspending global shipments worth over $800 to American consumers. DHL said the suspension of shipments will start today and should be temporary. The company says the shipment suspension is in response to new U.S. Customs rules. Authorities investigating a deadly shooting in Wheat Ridge that happened Sunday afternoon around 3:30 in the 3900 block of Sheridan. One person was reportedly in custody following the shooting. Multiple agencies assisting with the investigation, including Denver Police Department and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. An alleged threat is closing 3 schools today in Pueblo West. A Pueblo County Sheriff's spokesperson says that the threat came Sunday by email involving Pueblo School District 70. The sheriff ensures that the community that more resources will be sent, securing all schools during this time. Nuggets and the Clippers tonight in Lodo. Tip-off at 8. Nuggets lead that series 1-0. Avalanche leading the Dallas Stars 1-0 as well. Game 2 tonight at 7:30 in North Texas. 38 in North Glen, 37 in Highlands Ranch, 39 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on this Monday morning.
Defying the Supreme Court. It's like...
Had the wrong one, sorry. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Temperatures will be a bit more mild as we head into the new week here. Temperatures in Denver will make the low 70s today, near 70 tomorrow. Wednesday, lower 70s. Only a couple isolated late-day showers and isolated thunderstorms around today and tomorrow. However, for Wednesday through Friday, the chances of late-day shower and thunderstorm activity will be on the increase, and the end of the week and the weekend trending a little cooler. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Before we get to our scheduled guests, I want to talk to you about Wound Care Associates of Colorado. This is something that's very personal in my life because recently my youngest daughter had some surgery and the incision just wasn't healing like it should have. Just wasn't closing up, and I was worried because you and I both know that torn skin and tissue is the perfect place for germs, dirt, and bacteria to get access to your body. And I was worried that my daughter was being exposed because in past life, my aunt had a chronic wound, and she got MRSA because they were just trying to maintain the wound, not promoting it healing and closing up the skin and tissue, but keeping it open. And that's how she was exposed to MRSA that led to some really adverse consequences, including long hospital stays and even some amputations. So that's why, after the wound that my daughter had wasn't closing up, I reached out to Wound Care Associates of Colorado at coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com. And that's what you should do. Talk to Wound Care Associates of Colorado if anybody in your family has a pressure sore, a diabetic ulcer, a slow healing cut, because that little problem can become a very big problem, as I saw with my aunt in my own life. That's why I went with Wound Care Associates of Colorado, because they are doing it differently. First of all, they have improved healing outcomes. They are focused on promoting faster healing, not maintaining the wound, but making sure that your tissue and skin heal to prevent the dirt, germs, and bacteria getting into your body. But more importantly, they go old school. They are concierge service without the concierge price. They are bringing house calls back into form. Wound Care Associates of Colorado will send their wound-certified nurse practitioner to your location to take care of your wound. They'll set up a custom treatment plan and give you all the improved healing outcomes without all of the stress of having to fit it into your schedule, travel time, waiting in a doctor's office, things like that. Maybe it's someone in your life that has problems with transportation. Maybe it's a friend, family member that lives in a retirement community or assisted living center, and getting them and finding a way for them to travel to and from the doctor's office is a real pain. All of that stress and anxiety is taken away with Wound Care Associates of Colorado because they come to where you are and deliver all the healing in the privacy, comfort, and convenience of your own home. Why would you make any other choice? They have improved healing outcomes, and they do it on your time schedule where you are. They're the best going in Colorado today because they're doing it differently. And again, that improved healing outcome was vitally important to me and my family, and it should be for you and your loved ones. Reach out to Wound Care Associates of Colorado today at coloradowound.com, coloradowound.com. And when you do, tell me you heard about them here on the Jeff and Bill Show. Back to you, Jeff.
Bill, I'm grateful for their support and glad things are working out.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Yeah. It's crazy.
All right. I want to go to Matt Lamb. Matt Lamb is the associate editor of the College Fix and covers a lot of things Catholic related, covers the Pope. And if you missed the announcement, Pope Francis passing away just a few hours ago, joins us now on the Jeff and Bill Show, Matt Lamb, to provide some comment. Matt, thanks for joining the program.
Yes, thank you.
Matt, can you hear us now? All right, we'll get to Matt here in just a second. Bill's going to work on the audio there, see if we can get Matt up on here. But again, breaking, deeply sad news coming from the Vatican. Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. Holy Father died peacefully in the Vatican early this morning, surrounded by his closest aides and in the care of the medical team that have been monitoring his declining health in recent weeks. As the first Jesuit pope, the first from the Americas, and the first to take the name Francis, inspired by St. Francis of Assisi, his papacy marked a historic and at times controversial chapter in the life of the church. Bill, why don't we go to a break and we'll try to figure out if we can get Matt on. All right, you're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Sad news today as the Pope, leader, the pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. Joining us to give us some perspective, Matt Lamb, associate editor of the College Fix, covers many things Roman Catholic. He's Roman Catholic himself. Matt, thanks so much for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this morning.
So give us your initial thoughts on the passing of the pontiff.
Well, it's certainly sad. We know he was in the hospital for a number of weeks. He's mainly been out of the limelight. He's made some public appearances, and then the Vatican did announce this morning that he died. There's two sort of good things that happened yesterday. Of course, is Easter Sunday, so he was able to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance, and he gave him some gifts for his kids, which is great. Apparently, some chocolate eggs and some other gifts. And then he was able to go to St. Peter's Square and impart his blessing. Obviously, there were thousands of people there for Easter, for Holy Week, for Easter services. And so I believe that was his last public appearance was yesterday, and he was able to give his blessing, drive through the crowd. And then what will happen next is within the next week or so, there will be a funeral. And then within the next several weeks, 15 to 20 days or so, the election to pick his successor will begin.
This really is a historic moment, especially for younger generations to be able to watch this process, because it doesn't happen all that often that there is a new pope. It's typically upon the death of a pope. The resignation of Benedict was rare. I think the last time a pope had resigned was in the 1400s. So it typically requires the death of a pope. And in my lifetime, it's been Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and Pope Francis. So I've only seen 3 popes in my entire lifetime. So this really is a historic moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at Loyola University in Chicago, which is a Jesuit college, in 2013 when Pope Francis was elected. So there was a lot of excitement about that, being on a Jesuit campus, because Pope Francis, of course, used to be a member of the Jesuits, and then he left when he became a bishop. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think among young people, I mean, now that I can speak for all of them, it will be interesting because this next pope, depending on his age, could be the next pope for decades. Of course, Pope Francis was pope for about 12 years. I think this Pope Francis probably was the last Vatican II pope, if we can say something like that. I think among a lot of the younger people, we know that a lot of younger priests are more traditional. The younger people like myself, they either like the Latin Mass or they like the more traditional liturgy with smells and bells, with incense, Gregorian chant. But I think Pope Francis also spoke out, very eloquently on issues like technology. And, I know sometimes maybe people are critical of his comments on capitalism. I think a lot of his insights on sort of consumerism and throwaway culture are worth considering. And of course, we have to consider his perspective. He's not an American, so, we can look at his comments on the economy. Of course, he was an outspoken defender of human life and very critical of gender ideology as well. And so I think we have to give him credit for that.
That's Matt Lamb you're hearing from, associate editor of the College Fix, reflecting on the death of the Roman Catholic Pope Francis. Matt, what do you think his legacy is going to be as people reflect in the next week or so? So I believe there's like a 9-day mourning period before the College of Cardinals will convene to begin deliberating on who the next pope is. So you have a few days here where there'll be a reflection on Pope Francis's legacy. What do you think the folks will be saying?
Well, I would definitely recommend people check out this great column my boss at the College Fix, John J. Miller, has up this morning at the Boston Globe about Pope Francis on the dignity of life. I mean, I think that among maybe more traditional Catholics, they'll be critical of him on Latin Mass restrictions, but hopefully we can give him praise for life, speaking out about the commodification of human beings, especially through in vitro fertilization and surrogacy. Of course, I think more liberal Catholics, they'll like what he said about climate change and refugees. So of course we'll let the commentators and historians they'll try to paint Pope Francis the way they want. I mean, he certainly was a pope during a very interesting time. So if you think back to 2013, all that's happened with COVID, artificial intelligence, the way the economy has changed, all of the different, foreign policy disputes, wars that have gone on, and his views on that. So I think people will try to pick their own legacy for him that they want. I think certainly he's different than past popes. I think Pope John Paul II, because he was pope during the downfall of communism, because Pope Benedict was more of an academic, and he wrote, he just wrote very well. I think Pope Francis was, maybe we could say, more of a social pope. He was the first pope to be on Twitter. He wrote a wonderful encyclical last year. I encourage people to look it up. It's called On the Human and Divine Love of the Heart of Jesus Christ, or you could just look up, Pope Francis Sacred Heart encyclical, just about the way I think technology has taken over a lot of our lives, the frantic pace. And so I hope all of his writings, all of his statements can be taken on the whole. And of course, he's in some ways a political leader, but he's not a politician. So I think we need to be careful to not say, oh, he would have been this political party or that political party, and take his advice for what it is as the leader of the Catholic Church.
That's Matt Lamb, Associate Editor of College Fix, joining Jeff and Bill Live. We were reflecting on the death of Pope Francis, who passed away early this morning after Easter. Want to talk about the horse race for who may replace him. Right now, again, we don't have to go into names because for the audience, it's not really going to matter as much, but there's a person in the Philippines. There's, of course, the Secretary of State that was kind of Pope Francis's right-hand man, and we've got a person that has emerged outside of Ghana. Now, all three of them seem to be more progressive. There are some more conservative choices that are also on that list, but the top three so far seem to be among these three. And I want to kind of have your opinion, Matt, on these as far as the pluses and the minuses, if you're familiar with them at all. For me, the Philippines seems like a continuation of what Pope Francis was doing. You have the gentleman out of Ghana. He's also very progressive, but Ghana and having the first African pope would mean a lot, especially since that's where the growth area is for the Catholic Church right now. But the guy that is the right-hand man that comes out of Italy for Francis that has a lot of friends inside the Vatican, and he's been very big as far as the diplomatic side of the Holy See. Who do you think might have the inside track so far if you were going to be a betting man today on who replaces the Pope?
Well, so I don't know if I can bet very well on that. I would say that my colleague at LifeSite News, Michael Haynes, is definitely worth following on Twitter. He's the senior Vatican correspondent. If I had to pick, there is a lot of interest, it seems, among more traditional Catholics in Cardinal Pizzaballa in the Holy Land. I think he's been sort of a good voice among during this conflict. I know a lot of more traditional people like Cardinal Sarah, who's also from Ghana, so he would be the first African pope. But there will be, there's not supposed to be, I saw someone post today, a conservative commentator, that, Cardinal Sarah is running for pope. And I think we need to be careful to avoid sort of political language like that, because although it is an election, you're not really supposed to campaign for it. You'll see people say things that, Pope Francis appointed the cardinals, who of course can vote. The one that can vote for the Pope. Technically, any male Catholic can be Pope, so I mean, in theory, I'm in the running. But of course, it's always
I was baptized Catholic. I think maybe I'm not.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, so you're saying there's a chance, right?
Yeah. But I think with it, I since I follow more American Catholic politics, which Americans have a lot of influence. I will point out, it's kind of quite interesting. I've noticed a lot of Pope Francis's more recent bishop picks are more. They're younger. They seem to be more conservative, and I think part of that is that the younger priests, younger generations, they're coming up and they are more conservative in the sense of supportive of a more traditional liturgy that we saw before Vatican II. And I think a lot of them came up during Pope John Paul II, or a lot of them came up, during Pope Benedict, and he had an influence on them in terms of, academically, on issues of life, marriage. I think we've kind of seen the backlash to gender ideology now. And so I think it will be, I don't think we can necessarily say just because Pope Francis has appointed a certain amount of cardinals that it'll definitely be someone in his mold. Because, of course, Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict picked the cardinals who elected Pope Francis. So, we could go back to Pope Pius XII, and he picked the cardinals who, elected future popes who we might think of as more modernist, maybe for lack of a good phrase. So we'll see what happens. I think there will be a lot of people pushing their books and pushing their subscription services as they're the Vatican insiders. But I would certainly check out LifeSite News. Michael Haynes, I think they'll be a good source. Of course, they're right there, so a bit of conflict of interest. But I think they'll be a good source for a lot of the Vatican news coming up.
Now, Matt Lamb, Associated Editor with College Fix. Do you think that this is it is an opportunity for the Catholic Church to choose either a more progressive path or a more conservative path? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that the current body is going to continue more of the liberal philosophies of Francis and perhaps get more liberal rather than just getting someone that will continue walking his path? Or could it possibly be a tack back to the more conservative nature? And the only reason I ask this is because of what has recently happened here in the U.S., that we had Donald Trump, and then we did an election where it was anybody but Donald Trump, and now they're like, yeah, that didn't work out so well, so maybe now we're back to Donald Trump. So could we possibly see a swing like that inside of the church?
Yeah, it's possible. So if you sort of think of Vatican II as was supposed to be more of a opening up of the church, which might say more like small L liberalizing, and then what followed was Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI, who very much argued that in favor of the reforms of Vatican II, but sort of made the argument that it was being misrepresented, and they were more supportive of Latin Mass, traditional liturgy. I mean, I think Pope Benedict more than Pope John Paul II. Of course, it's more in Pontificum. And then Pope Francis going the other way. So I think it's fair to say that in any sort of political type situation, there will be swings back and forth. We'd have to look at every cardinal that will be able to vote and what are their interests. And of course, like any sort of political situation, there's different interests going on, behind the scenes that we might not understand. I don't know if it's as interesting as maybe that awful Conclave movie that came out. There certainly will not be a transgender pope or whatever the nonsense was in that movie. But it's very possible. I think that if you look at the landscape of the growth of the Catholic Church is in Africa, which is heavily influenced by traditional religious groups, Institute of Christ the King, Society of St. Pius X, as well as just traditional liturgy. A lot of the sort of wacky changes we saw in the Mass post-Vatican II here in America did not happen overseas, whereas a lot of the European countries, I mean, in some ways, there is a decline in the Catholic Church. Traditional religious groups have a lot of influence, for example, in France. And so those groups are growing, whereas a lot of the older religious orders, for example, are dying. That means as Pope Francis picked bishops, some of those people were cardinals, they're picking from a different group of people than perhaps Pope John Paul II was. And I think in 20 or 30 years, or even in 10 or 15 years, because younger priests are more conservative, are more traditional, more small O orthodox, that the bishops they pick, because there's just a smaller group of people, Pope Benedict talked about a smaller church, that set will be more conservative, for lack of a better word, more traditional. And so that's something that will play out, and it may play out the conclave, and it will play out in the next couple of years. I mean, the election of the Pope is not, the final decision. There are personnel policy, of course, and so who that person will pick will also influence the direction of the church.
That's Matt Lamb, associate editor of the College Fix. Any chance we could see an American Pope, Cardinal Dolan, for instance?
Yeah, there's never been one. There's never been an African Pope. There hadn't been a non-European Pope for hundreds of years. And so it's certainly possible. Yeah, Cardinal Dolan. My personal vote, if I had to pick, would be Cardinal Burke. It's who my son's named after. Sort of a traditional cardinal, but I don't unfortunately have a vote. But that's who I would like to see if we were going to have an American Pope.
That's Matt Lamb, associate editor of the College Fix. Matt, I had a conversation with Rick Santorum years and years ago, and this was kind of the height of the abuse that was taking place within the Catholic Church by priests. And he said, a lot of this stems from breakdowns that took place at the seminary level, not identifying good candidates at that point, kind of allowing people to come in and lead the church that never should have been leading the church in the first place. Have you seen, from your perspective, the last 20 years or so, a change at the seminary level that is producing better priests?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can just speak from locally here. You talk to the seminarians, meet them. There, a lot of them they wear the traditional cassock, not the clerical collar. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. They seem to be more into traditional works. There was a survey out, I believe, last year, 2 years ago, that the younger priests are more conservative. I think there was a problem with homosexuality in the seminaries, in the priesthood. It's kind of interesting now actually that homosexuality is more accepted, which I'm not in favor of. I think there will be fewer of those people entering the priesthood because now it's actually more accepted to be gay. And so in some ways, the payoff is that the priests who are entering there are more traditional. We won't hopefully have the same problems with abuse, which I think a lot of them are tied to homosexuality, to be honest. And one reason we know this is that most of the victims were boys, not women. And so I think even setting the abuse issue aside, yeah, I think they are more conservative, more traditional. That doesn't mean there won't be problems, and that doesn't mean outside of abuse there won't be problems. But just from the seminarians, I know, and just from things I see, they do tend to be. I mean, you can even look this up in like National Catholic Reporter, which is the liberal outlet. They were actually told not to call themselves Catholic, but they're reporting on young priests being more traditional. So I think when the more conservative Catholic websites and more liberal Catholic websites agree something is happening, then it's probably a good proof it is happening. And so to your point, yeah, I think the next generation of priests, they are more focused on confession, more focused on the rosary, more focused on traditional practices. And I think that will continue to pay off with more vocations down the road.
That's Matt Lamb, associate editor of College Fix, upon the announcement that Pope Francis has passed away. Matt, thanks for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show today.
Yes, thank you a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Would love to hear thoughts, particularly if you are Roman Catholic. What's your reflection of Pope Francis, his impact? Did you support him? Are you looking for a more conservative direction of the Catholic Church? Phone lines are open, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115, 720-819-5115. Folks, I want to talk to you about the Colorado Farm Bureau. Whether you pulled out your skis or snowmobiles this last winter, it was a great year for winter fun, but the snow means even more to Colorado agriculture, and I want you to know that our state's farmers and ranchers are doing their part to protect our future water resources. The people of Colorado agriculture always have conservation, efficiency, and reuse top of mind when it comes to water use. As the metro area continues to grow, Colorado Farm Bureau leads talks with state policymakers about preserving water for all of our areas of the state as pressure on the water system grows. It's going to take all of us to find a solution. My friends at the Colorado Farm Bureau are leaders in water conservation and water policy. They understand how to balance water for crops and water for families, and they're doing more with less. You can do your part. I recommend you join and become a member today. Go to coloradofarmbureau.com. That's coloradofarmbureau.com to join them. We'll continue with the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Unfortunate news. Pope Francis passing away early this morning. Did a final mass at the Vatican. Got to be a part of that. Met with J.D. Vance, and then a few hours later passed away. Now, Bill, I'm not Roman Catholic, initially baptized Catholic. I've been to the Vatican before. Incredible place. You've been to the Vatican too.
Yes, I have. Yeah, that was fun. That was an incredible
What took
day.
you out there? Did you travel with family?
Yeah, it was family. It was actually a family destination wedding at the time.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, in fact, it's one of the best things. There are a couple of great advice pieces that we got from friends. But one of the best pieces of advice we got was when you're wandering in and around Italy, every time, no matter what you're doing, that you come across a church, stop, go in.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Single time. And it's a rule. You have to, because what you end up with, because Rome is so old, that you have this wonderful chronology of how the church developed and evolved. In fact, my wife and I, and we'll get to the Vatican in a sec, one of the best experiences are walking down this road, and it's a street and buildings, huge skyscrapers on either side, big giant office buildings, and then there's this path of stairs that go down, about 30 stairs that all of a sudden just divert from the sidewalk, and it's like it goes underneath where this large office building is built. And we look down there, and there's this dark wall and a wooden door. And we went, this looks interesting.
Yeah.
We went down there, and it was a church that was more than 1,000 years old.
Wow.
And we walk in, and the office building was built over the top of it. And it is tiny and small roofs and small areas and a handful of pews and a couple of little vestibules off to the side. And the thing is probably not larger than most of Denver's one-bedroom apartments. It's tiny.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it is amazing. And so those were those experiences that we had. Actually, I happened to bump into John Paul for a second there.
Really?
Well, we're going through some areas, and all of a sudden we're overlooking a small chapel. And so we're walking through, and there's this balcony where we can overlook this small chapel. And all of a sudden, some people in some robes start walking in. And then the people in the funny hats start walking, and you're like, this is interesting. And so we just kind of stop there. There's only like 4 of us, stand there for a little bit. And then some of the cardinals start coming in and filling in the first few rows. And we're like, And sure enough, in walks the Pope. And he starts performing a small little mass there. Now, eventually, one of the people from the church, or from the Vatican, come up and they usher us out. But they let us stand there for about 5 minutes to watch the beginning of this. And he's probably 40 feet from us total.
Wow.
So it was really, really cool. And again, we're just up in this little balcony up above what they were doing, and we weren't supposed to be there at the time or whatever. And they moved off. You're not supposed to be here. This should have been closed off a little while ago. And okay, thank you. I moved along. But that was amazing. But yeah, it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. And this is going to be a change for the church. We'll see what this goes.
Yeah, I'm interested in your perspective, because I know you take your Catholic faith very seriously.
Yeah,
it's core to who you are.
Yep.
And as you've now lived through a number of these popes.
Yeah, I have.
Give me your reflections on Pope Francis.
The thing for me is that I felt, okay, now this is a personal thing. This is completely and totally personal. I hated Pope Benedict for a lot of reasons. I understood why he was the choice at that time, but felt he was 180 degrees away from where the church needed to go at that time. And I felt that he brought a lot of shame and disappointment to my church. And I really, really disliked him. I mean, I've been very open on the show that if I had the opportunity to push him into hell, I wouldn't hesitate. That's how much I hate him at the core of his person, because he was involved in hiding and moving the priests around during the abuse scandal. He's the guy. He's the heavy. Pope Benedict at the time was Cardinal Ratzinger. He was the enforcement arm of the Vatican, and the process and procedures for taking priests out of parishes in which they have molested or assaulted someone and moving them to a different parish and not letting that new parish know about it. That's his policy. He's the one at the core of it that did that. And I will never, ever, ever forgive him for that. And that's personal. That's me. That's something that I have to deal with personally. That is my cross that I have to carry. And I do not regret it in any way, shape, or form, because I think that strongly about it. I thought Francis was a breath of fresh air. I thought he was a new idea of a community for the church. I thought he was a new chapter, getting away, hopefully, from some of the idea of looking at the abuse and trying to chart a new path and hopefully bringing in new Catholics into the fold. They've done that in Africa, done it somewhat in Latin America, haven't succeeded necessarily in Europe and in the Americas, but that's okay. This, to me, is going to be, again, another new chapter. I'm trying to see the power structure behind the Pope and who is going to push on what. There's a big, strong push to make the church more conservative now because they believe that's the direction. So there is going to be a push for some of these conservative popes. There's one out of Hungary who's very conservative that has got kind of an inside track. There's a gentleman, Matt Lamb, who joined us for the associate editor of College Fix, joined us and talked about it out of Africa. He's really good. There's another guy out of Africa that's very liberal. I think that this is going to be a maintenance pick for the Pope. I think that Francis was outside the boundaries of what they expected, and so I think they're going to go with something that is closer inside the boundaries. That's why right now my inside pick is his Secretary of State, because he's out of Italy. He has the diplomatic experience. He has the idea of continuation of some of Francis's things, but at the core, his theology is very, very moderate. You would not consider him to be a progressive Catholic, except in a few little areas, but he's not super conservative, except in a few areas. So I think that at the end of the day, he's going to be most palatable to everybody inside of that room. Although I do think it's going to take a few rounds. I think we're going to go several days. Pope has to be interned, I think, in 6 or 8 days after death. And then after that, you bring all the cardinals in and they start doing the votes and stuff. I think you need to have one in the next 20 to 30 days. But I think this is going to go a couple of rounds. I think they're going to, because I think everybody's going to vote their spirit first, and then the second and third votes are going to be practicality. And we'll see how that goes. But if I had to put money in Vegas right now, the guy's the Secretary of State from Italy, because he's a moderate. I think that's what closes the deal for him, is because he doesn't have a foot in the progressive side or in the super conservative side, and I think he'll be palatable for both arms. So that's a guess.
Phone lines are open upon the death of Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your reflections on the Pope. Where do you think the Catholic Church is going to go from here? All of that, give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
KNUS.
It is 8 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Monday, April 21st, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710 KNUS. We begin today's broadcasting with breaking and deeply saddening news coming from the Vatican. Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. We're taking phone calls and texts as folks reflect upon his papacy, upon the future of the Catholic Church. Phone lines are open, 303-696-1971. Now is time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good Monday morning. It's 46 and kind of sunny outside, partly cloudy, expecting a high of 71 today. The 710 5-day forecast is coming up. Our top story.
The statement from Cardinal Kevin Farrell reads in part, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis."
Pope Francis is dead at the age of 88. Tributes are pouring in. Vice President J.D. Vance, who met Francis at the Vatican a few hours before he died on Sunday, Easter Sunday, said his heart goes out to everyone who loved him. Also reacting to the news, the White House posted on X, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis." The College of Cardinals will soon hold several meetings at the Vatican to start the process of selecting a new pope. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland says it's time for Trump to put up or shut up in court. He recently returned from El Salvador to sit down with gangbanger Kilmar Obrego Garcia. He says a federal judge says that there's no evidence linking Garcia to MS-13. So the judge is freaking blind. He has MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. I think the judge should donate and make sure that Garcia becomes a neighbor of the judge, his or her. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. I'm not sure. So he can experience the love of Garcia. Here's Eddie Van Hollen.
I want to be very clear. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for the man's rights. His constitutional rights to due process. And the proper place to litigate that is in the courts. And the most recent federal district court judge that looked at this, Judge Zinnes, said that the administration had presented no evidence of his connection to MS-13 or, by the way, to any other criminal, gang, or terrorist activity.
Fools. The U.S. Supreme Court issued a 7-2 ruling early Saturday morning to temporarily prevent the DJT administration from deporting Venezuelan detainees in Tejas. Chris Murray, First and 14th Law, in studio with Jeff and Billy this morning. Will we find out more today?
The Supreme Court ordered John Sauer, that's the new Solicitor General, actually a law school classmate of mine, to file a response to the motion with the Supreme Court as soon as possible. You could expect that the Solicitor General's office, I would expect they'll file something today. If not today, there's actually several oral arguments at the Supreme Court, so it might be tomorrow. Including the Solicitor General's office, I think, has 3 cases they're arguing today.
Authorities investigating a deadly shooting in Wheat Ridge that happened Sunday afternoon around 3:30 in the 3900 block of Sheridan. One person was reportedly in custody following the shooting. Multiple agencies assisting with the investigation, including DPD and Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has reportedly shared more detailed military plans across a second group chat in the Signal app, this time with members of his family. Multiple reports say Hegseth shared the military plans regarding an operation against Houthis in Yemen. His brother, this is new to me, his brother, lawyer, and wife, but his brother and lawyer both have jobs in the Department of Defense. They didn't report that about 20 hours ago, even though his wife does not. Florida State University tries to return to normal today after 2 people were killed in that on-campus shooting last week. Classes will resume, but the school is also offering students a choice of going remote. Congestion pricing remains on in New York City despite the federal government's Easter deadline to end the controversial toll. That means the drivers coming into Manhattan this morning still paying $9, a $9 toll that Governor Hochul and the MTA says is needed to help pay for public transit projects throughout New York City. That is incredible. Charlie Kirk on with Bill Maher over the weekend. The difference between liberal and woke.
What liberals believe, woke is something completely different. It's very often the opposite of it. You know, liberalism is let's live in a colorblind society. That's the goal. Woke's goal is we see race everywhere.
Race obsession.
Yes. Okay. So that's not liberal. You changed. Liberal is there a two-state solution. Woke is river to the sea. Okay. So just don't take my word and say you're that. You took this and took it to. You got off the F train, you fell asleep, and you got off the 20 stops too far, and don't blame me for that.
Once again, half right. Actually, classic liberals are actually conservatives who are colorblind, not lefties, but it's close. Just stop voting for Democrats, Mark. Yeah, smoke your dope and smoke the commies out, okay? You'll be a lot happier. Nuggets and the Clippers tonight in Lodo, tip-off at 8 o'clock. Nuggets lead the series 1-0. Avalanche and the Stars tonight in North Texas, 7:30. They drop the puck. Dallas trailing 1-0 to the Avalanche in that series. 43 in Broomfield, 44 in Englewood, 46 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue on Monday morning.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
You don't drink?
No.
Or smoke pot?
No.
And you're married and super Christian. We're going to get along great.
Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Temperatures will be a bit more mild as we head into the new week here. Temperatures in Denver will make the low 70s today, near 70 tomorrow. Wednesday, lower 70s. Only a couple isolated late-day showers and isolated thunderstorms around today and tomorrow. However, for Wednesday through Friday, the chances of late-day shower and thunderstorm activity will be on the increase, and the end of the week and the weekend trending a little cooler. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Sad news, the passing of Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, passing away at the age of 88 early this morning. We're taking your phone calls, your reflections on the Pope, where the Roman Catholic Church is going to go now. Let's go to Francis in Golden. Good morning, Francis.
Good morning.
Hey, guys. Hey. I'm just kind of lamenting the passing of another Francis. The world needs more Francises.
Yes, they do.
Less. But, I felt like Pope Francis, he was liberal socially, but he was skewing a little bit more conservative, at least in terms of Mass and the liturgy and that sort of thing. And he was Jesuit trained, and, no one, 40 years ago would have ever bet that there was ever going to be a Jesuit pope ever. I mean, the Jesuits are they stand a little bit to the side of a lot of Catholics in general because they're heavily education oriented and always have been. Them and the Dominicans a little bit, but back centuries and centuries ago, education wasn't exactly a priority for the church. It was almost kind of keep people more in the dark, but. I don't know. I see when I go to church, I see a lot more conservative dress, conservative priests a little bit, which is I kind of find it a little bit refreshing, to be honest. It's a pendulum within the church too. It swings both directions, and so it'll be interesting to see if there's even a possibility of another Jesuit pope. I kind of doubt it. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty much certain that it won't be. But I don't know. I was glad he was able to at least, see an Easter again before he passed away. You wonder, when I was listening to that he couldn't do Mass, but he could do a blessing and this sort of thing, and knowing he was just out of the hospital for an extended stay and had pneumonia, it goes through your mind. I was like, this guy is 88 years old, and how many more days is he going to see, let alone Easters? And I got my answer this morning. It was unfortunate.
Yeah, Francis, I was happy as a Roman Catholic to see him at least be able to celebrate Easter. There's something bittersweet about him passing beyond Easter, which is kind of important. But yeah, I think you're right about not having any more Jesuits. I think it'll be a long time before a lot of the Cardinals will be okay with that one. It was one thing in a sidelight in my family. One of the things that my dad did not like the Jesuits. I was not allowed to go to a school where the Jesuits were teaching. So
you went to Mullen,
yeah,
right?
I went to Mullen, and I was not allowed to go to Regis. I was not allowed to go to Regis because Regis is a Jesuit school, and I was not allowed. No. That was never even part of the discussion, and I remember that vehemently when I was in 7th and 8th grade because I had some friends that were going to Regis, and nobody was going to Mullen. And I came home and I'm thinking about Regis. And I won't say it right now what my dad said because of the FCC says we can't say several of the words that came out of his mouth that afternoon. But it did have something to do with, no, I'm never going to send you to the Jesuits. So, yeah, yeah.
You and I were opposites, man. I was heavy Jesuit all the way. Jesuit.
Oh, that's fantastic.
My whole family. But
that would have been funny.
Yeah.
We'd have been accusing each other of heresy if we were friends back in the day.
Oh, jeez. I know. Yeah. Well, we can be heretical in our own little way. We can throw our own little heretic. That's okay.
There are times in which, and I had to go to, I went to a confession recently, and the priest went, you did that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, it was only words, but yes. And he's like, jeez, okay. So, yeah, I know. I understand, man.
Confession going into Easter. God darn it. And I've got plenty to confess.
Oh, yeah. That's why I had to do it, man. I had to get it clean. I had to go clean in, man. Hey, thanks, Francis. Have a good day, man.
Later, gang.
Francis's line will be open 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115, 720-819-5115. Let's go to Barney in Colorado Springs. Good morning, Barney. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Hey, Jeff, you look good in a cowboy hat. I'll give you that.
Oh, thanks. I need to wear it more often.
Yeah, you do. I think you're a pretty decent guy, too, so I'm going to give you that. So,
thanks, Barney. What's on your mind?
Well, Francis, good call, buddy. You nail it. And I'm kind of with him on the Jesuits. I mean, those guys were the smart ones. And when Francis would get on this political crap, I didn't like it, the green, but I think down deep he was a decent guy. You want to I'll tell you what you want to do if you're the Catholic Church, if you want to grow. Don't pick an old guy. Actually, you just got to go down to a Baptist church in North Carolina, preferably a black Baptist church. That's what you need to do, because when you walk out of church, you need to feel good, and those people know how to sing.
Yep.
And it's a love it. And I do like the conservative bend now. I want them to be conservative. You want right and wrong, but Billy's right on the money with Benedict. He did all the covering up. He did all he didn't do his Cardinals. His lower guys did, and he knew about it. And I think, first off, animals do go to heaven. If you do that, and you bring a little good music in, and pick a young guy. We don't need to pick an old guy. We really don't. I mean, I don't know. I pick a young guy, period.
Barney, I think they don't go too young, because I think that they look at the idea of, one, the older Cardinals are like, I can't have someone younger than me bossing me around, etc. But then they're also stuck with him for so many years. At this point, you do someone 100%. That's in late 60s, early 70s, you're like, we got 1-2 decades, and that's about it.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. But I still would, if you want to change up and get the young people, you want the church to grow. I was raised Catholic. I'm like, probably Jeff. I was Baptist. I did have that younger it made me a better. God, I have no idea where I would have ended up if I didn't have that coming from the mother, from my mom.
Good old dose of Catholic guilt.
The Catholic guilt, and just the guilt for you just to not do wrong. But God Almighty, I mean, I cut loose from. I just think I would have been a lot worse person if I wouldn't have been raised with that Catholic. By the way, Jeff, were you working for Romney when that debate went on at DU?
Oh yeah, in 12. Yep.
Okay. So my daughter was in school there, and she was a conservative till that debate. Romney won that debate.
Yeah,
and
he did.
The one at DU, he did. Really
and
did.
that turned her progressive?
I have no idea, buddy, but all I know is after that debate, she was there, and she turned it. I used to call her my lefty. Now she's just my little commie. I don't know. Something happened that day, so I think I'm going to blame you for it. I don't know. All those years.
All right, you want to? I've got a great story about that debate. We were so I was the coalitions director for Mitt Romney, and you pretty much do whatever you're asked to by the state manager. At that point, the guy was James Garcia, and he goes down and he goes, "I want you to bracket Barack Obama." Okay, and so bracketing is a political term where you try to do something to kind of throw him off his game a little bit. And all the Democrats were meeting in the middle of campus, and they're having a big rally there. And we said to ourselves, well, let's go figure out the way he's going to come here and line the exit of the highway that he's going to travel in with just a bunch of college Republican kids yelling and screaming like, who cares? Who cares about the middle of the campus rally? Let's go see if we can mess around with Barack Obama a little bit. So we figured out which hotel he was at. And if you remember, they brought in these big snowplows to clear out I-25 for Barack Obama to go from his hotel to the DU debate. So they completely shut down I-25. So we figured, okay, his hotel's over here. He's probably going to come northbound on I-25. And so we lined the entire exit ramp with Romney signs. And then when he turned off of I-25 onto southbound University, he was met with like 500 screaming college Republicans that were literally 6 inches from his face when he was in the Beast, right, going by in his motorcade.
Right.
And he just hadn't faced that type of opposition because this was his second term. You go in, you get to become the president, and everyone treats you well. And then all of a sudden, he's met with hundreds of these college Republican kids just yelling and screaming in his face. And then he didn't perform that well. So I take total credit for that. We got under his skin a little bit, messed with him. Gosh, it was a lot of fun.
That might explain it. And, he's on his way to DU. He knew it was – I'm sure they told him, DU, man, it's 99% liberal. So
right.
He probably thought he was going into the – that's crazy. But he really – you know what? You might get credit for that, buddy, because he did. Romney ate him up. I give him that. I hate Romney. I voted for him, but he ate him up. But, that's awesome.
Barney, what are you looking for in the next Catholic priest or Pope? Would you like to see one more like John Paul, one more like Francis?
John Paul.
Yeah.
I like John Paul. And a little bit of John Paul and Francis mixed together. How about that? Not the political from Francis, but like I said, I can't. Some of the stuff that Francis did early on was pretty damn cool because some of these they walk around like they're royal. I don't like the royalty aspect, even though they kind of are. I just think more human, and I think he seemed more human. So I give him that, but keep the political stuff away, right or left. Just keep it away. We don't need it. That's not what church is about. But
yeah, Barney, great call. I appreciate it. Barney's line will be open.
Better, buddy.
Thank you, brother. 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971. Let's go to Steve in Denver.
Folks.
Good morning, Steve. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
3 quick hitters here. I graduated from 2 Jesuit universities, and I have to tell you that the whole vibe on a Jesuit campus is wonderful. This is my, I'm biased, but it's serious. It's quiet compared to other places, and so I was real happy with this. I think this is more anecdotal. I think with Francis, I did see a lot more young families come to the Catholic Church. Some of them, at least here in Denver, I saw a resurgence. I don't know if that's directly related. And I've also lived in the Deep South and attended black churches like the caller before. And I think the church has to grow. The church has to have an open heart, open mind, continue to grow. Final thing is a request to Jeff. Even though I disagree with you politically all up and down, I love it when you talk about your testimony. I saw something the last couple of days about your relationship with Jesus. And if you could ever post, a more full description of that on your Twitter or wherever, I'd find it very helpful.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you, Steve. I'd be happy to do that. We had a brief conversation during the last show about that, but yeah, the prodigal son is a story that connects very well with me. A man finding himself at total loss, thinking that what the world offered was going to provide any type of joy, not finding it there, and then coming home to the Father. So thanks, Steve. Appreciate the call, man. It was very kind of Steve. Yeah, thank you. So we're talking Pope Francis. We're talking the death of Pope Francis, the impact he had as Pope, what you thought of him, and where you think the Catholic Church should go today, what kind of Pope you'd like to see. The sense I'm getting from a lot of folks is kind of a mix of Pope John Paul and Pope Francis.
Yeah,
they like that.
Which I think that leans towards the moderate angle, is I don't think you're going to see a swing. I don't think they're going to want to find someone that is really liberal, much in the vein that Francis was. There's the guy that I mentioned earlier out of the Philippines. It's more of that line. I've got a couple of contenders that come out of Africa, some very liberal, some very conservative. I don't necessarily see a moderate there. And so that's why I think Italy is where they're going to be going for this one, because I think you're going to find some, again, I keep going back to the Secretary of State, because it's the path of least resistance. And that's who I think has the inside track right now once the vote goes on. But let's see what happens. Once you get into the third vote, then there could be some very interesting things.
The sense I'm getting, though, from all of our callers, and I hear it from Steve, too, I heard it from Barney, is people are generally satisfied with the direction of the Catholic Church right now, which is we've worked to clear out the problems we had with the abuse, right? And the Catholic Church is sure had to pay for that. They don't want a progressive pope to the point where you're abandoning traditional commitments to marriage, human life, those types of things. But you don't want necessarily somebody that's so conservative that I guess you would abandon that commitment to the poor, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and this is a shout out to Matt Lamb, associate editor of College Fix, that was with us last hour. I didn't get a chance when he was on the air with us, but he threw out a phrase that warmed the cockles of my dark little heart when he talked about the idea that we're not going back, that some people want to go back to some of the old church smells and bells. That's an old Catholic thing. Yeah, the idea of the smells and bells. A lot of bells, a lot of incense, a lot of noises, a lot of things like that, and how that goes. And I think there's a longing for that, but I don't think there is necessarily a push to go back to the very conservative church as far as where it was going forward. And in fact, I mean, if you go back to where Jesus starts the Catholic Church and then all the Protestants that bloom from it, it was, I hate to say it, but it was a breaking of the tradition. I don't want to say progressive, because I think that gets to be too much of a loaded word, because I don't think that he was necessarily quote unquote progressive as we think of it now.
Right.
But he was. Yeah, but he wanted to change the rules and the situation of the structure. It was a renewal of the covenant. And so he was changing the covenant. It was a new deal, a new rule. And so he did need the church to get back to things that God wanted it to focus on. So he wasn't coming here to be super lib, but he was coming here to say, hey, you guys have built a structure that is more serving man than it is the word of God, and we got to go back to heaven. We've got to go back to the service of the Lord, and that's what he was trying to do. And so as long as we get a pope that is of that nature, I think you're going to go well. And although when they talked about going back to some of the Latin stuff, shout out to the service I went to over Easter, a little bit of Latin. because a lot of it was an older congregation, a much older congregation, and the priest, to his credit, threw in some Latin, and I was like, my man, I like you a lot. He knew who he was talking to. It was cool.
Are you happy with the direction of the Catholic Church? Do you want to see some improvements? What do you think of the future is going to look like, and what are your thoughts on Pope Francis? Give us a call, 303-696-1971. Someone that I think would make a great pope. Now, I'm not Roman Catholic. I was baptized Catholic, but I consider myself a Protestant, a Presbyterian. But somebody that would do a good job at this? Dan Caplis with Dan Caplis Law. Dan suggests you should choose a lawyer who shares your values, because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says a lot about you to everybody involved in the case. Dan Caplis, the son of a police officer and a former seminarian who's dedicated the last 40 years of his life to helping people who are hurt in serious motor vehicle crashes. Dan is believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Dan is also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Caplis Law is the official law firm partner of the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Dan Caplis Law is a serious firm for serious cases. Dan accepts righteous injury cases on a percentage fee basis so that he can represent good people from all walks of life without regard to ability to pay. So if you need Dan's help, give him a call. Here's the phone number, 303-770-5551. That's 303-770-5551. Or hit dancaplisLaw.com. That's Dan, C-A-P-L-I-S Law.com. Dan Caplis for Pope. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. A lot of international news breaking this weekend. We're talking about the death of Pope Francis early this morning at the Vatican. Is Russia serious about a ceasefire? Then why are attacks continuing? Meanwhile, there's talks underway with regards to Iran and nuclear weapons, all of that. And joining us to give us some perspective now, Rory O'Neill, national correspondent with NBC News. Good morning, Rory. Thanks for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Happy Monday.
You too. Let's first talk about Russia and potential ceasefire there. Any news, any breaking news on that?
Well, over the weekend, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, said that he would take part in a ceasefire in Ukraine, and got a lot of good headlines for saying, "Oh, that's great, the ceasefire for Easter." But that's not what happened, and in fact, it was pretty much business as usual on Easter Sunday. President Zelensky of Ukraine says there were 59 instances of Russians shelling Ukraine. 5 assaults by units along the front lines, dozens of drone strikes. Russia says Ukraine was launching drones into us as well. So all this talk of a ceasefire for Easter never really materialized.
That's Rory O'Neill, NBC News national correspondent. Now, we've also heard that Marco Rubio and the president getting frustrated with a potential peace deal. Can you give us some updates on that?
Yeah, we heard from Secretary Rubio last week saying that something's got to move within the next week, that these back and forth that he and Steve Witkoff have been having really are pointless unless somebody makes a move. President Trump has been trying to promote the ceasefire, saying it's time for the killing to stop. He and the leaders from Ukraine appeared ready to say, all right, we'll stop. But Russia has not been so willing. And, Russia, the discussion is that Russia is not interested in a temporary ceasefire, but rather one full peace deal to end this thing that would give them control of about 20% of what we called Ukraine and a whole bunch of other stuff, and guarantees that Ukraine won't enter NATO ever. But, we haven't gotten that far yet in the process.
That's Rory O'Neill. Now, Rory, do you think that Trump would agree, from your perspective, what you've heard, that to a deal where there wouldn't essentially he would agree to that Ukraine would not join NATO, that he would support that?
That probably seems the easiest part of this for the President Trump to support. And then President Zelensky has said, well, look, USA, you're not going to negotiate away 20% of the country that Russia took illegally in an illegal invasion. And a lot of other European NATO members in particular are saying, well, wait a minute, we're not going to reward Putin here, are we? Here's a guy that just decided to invade a country and win 20% of it. We don't want to encourage that because we're going to be next.
Rory O'Neill, NBC News national correspondent. Let's talk nuclear with Iran. Where are we with those talks?
Yeah, we did have talks in Rome, by the way, this weekend as well. A little bit of progress made. Now some the foreign minister there says that the next move is for, quote, expert level, unquote, talks to start happening as early as next week. They had a second round of indirect negotiations over the weekend there in Rome. I think Oman was sort of brokering things. But now they want to move to a new phase that's a bit more technical in nature. So we bring in the experts. And at least there's talking and there's some progress being made. But, President Trump has said it is unacceptable for Iran to have a nuclear weapon in the region. Iran, of course, says it needs it to protect itself. Plus, Iran is trying to get the sanctions on its economy lifted. So we're still early days in some of these talks.
It's a very busy few weeks for Marco Rubio. What do you think? How do you think the president looks at the work Marco Rubio's doing? They were opponents at one point running in the primary, and we all remember the little hands Marco, but they seem to have mended that. And now Marco Rubio pushing the agenda for the president out there as Secretary of State. What do you make of their relationship?
Well, a bit. I think they're a bit surprised that another gentleman is sort of the X factor in this Steve Witkoff. They called him an envoy for President Trump that Trump has sent to meet in Moscow with Vladimir Putin and had these talks in Oman, in Qatar, trying to broker peace with Israel and Hamas, trying to broker a deal with Iran and the nukes. So I think Mr. Witkoff has almost been more involved in many ways, more so than Secretary Rubio, who, of course, was a big foreign affairs specialist while serving in the U.S. Senate, former chair of the Intelligence Committee or ranking member. So it's, I'm surprised at how much Rubio actually is in the back seat with Witkoff driving, it seems.
That's Rory O'Neill, NBC News national correspondent. Now, Rory, big news coming early this morning with the passing of Pope Francis. I mean, this just took place hours after he participated in a mass, met with J.D. Vance, and now the world's eyes are upon the Vatican as they're going to pick a new pope. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and so this is starting a process, right, with the passing of the Pope earlier this morning. Now there's going to be a funeral probably by the end of the week, and then about another week or two will pass before they start the conclave. We haven't gotten an official calendar yet of all these dates that have been agreed to. But, the conclave will be interesting because now we're going to see, does the church leadership want to continue the more liberal agenda of Francis, or do they want to go back to something more conservative that we saw under Francis's predecessor, Pope Benedict? So I think who the cardinals pick next is really going to define a lot of the church for years ahead.
Lots on the international stage. Pope Francis passing away, plus discussions around nuclear Iran and maybe possibly a peace deal in Ukraine. Very busy. Lots to cover. Rory O'Neill, NBC News national correspondent, joining the Jeff and Bill Show. Sir, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we'll get to your phone calls, Jim, here in just a second. I want to talk to you about our friends over at Alarm Detection Systems. Reliability isn't optional when business security is on the line. It's essential. Businesses trust alarm detection systems for the highest level of service and expertise. Think about the time you could be saving using one source for cameras, key card access, fire, and intrusion systems. ADS offers expert alarm installation and testing by highly trained technicians, 24/7 professional monitoring, same day or next day service upon request because downtime isn't an option. Dedicated teams for cameras, access control, and fire alarms, and over 300 security professionals working for you. Choosing ADS means your business stays protected and will be ready to open tomorrow. They combined human monitoring with the latest AI camera technology to provide crime prevention in real time. Trusted by small and large businesses, including many Colorado schools, their security experts will review your system totally for free. Go to adsalarm.com and schedule your meeting today. adsalarm.com, Alarm Detection Systems, the first choice of Front Range and Colorado businesses, adsalarm.com. All right, let's go to the phone lines. Jim in Littleton. Good morning, Jim. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jeff and Bill. It's very sad news about Pope Francis. I can just say, there's definitely a discussion about how much of going back to the old ways in the Catholic Church, and that's concerning Latin into the Mass. And there's a lot of people that, really are embracing it. And they're trying to teach those that don't know Latin some Latin, just some of the prayers as well as some of the songs. But there's a lot of people that are not exactly embracing it. So depending on where you go, you'll see the amount of Latin into it. I'm in the Colorado Springs diocese, and I think they're a little bit more conservative. Therefore, they're now allowing more of the Latin into the Mass, where if you go to Denver, maybe not as much.
Yeah, and Jim, help those of us that don't attend Mass like myself. What is a Latin Mass, and why is it considered more conservative?
Well, because it goes back to the roots of the original Mass. I mean, that's how Masses used to be done in the Catholic Church. They were all in Latin. They were not in the language of the native people. They were all in Latin. Wherever you went in the world, if you were a Catholic, that Mass would be in Latin, not in the native language.
And Jim, also, the priest wouldn't even face the congregation early on.
Correct.
Yeah, the priest would have his back to the congregation, and you wouldn't even see anything going on the altar. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, there was clearly a separation of the Mass and the congregants, and that, as things have evolved, that dividing line separated. And so, with Latin now being brought back, and it's brought back in various parts of the songs and stuff like that. I really enjoy it. And the Catholic Church has been trying to teach people a little bit of Latin. This is actually, if you know English, Latin was what gave us most of our scientific knowledge of what exactly we have out there. So it's good to have that.
And I've heard, though, that Pope Francis didn't support the Latin Mass. Is that true?
No. Well, no, that's not true. Because if he didn't, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened. He basically was not, he basically was wanting to control the amount of Latin in the Mass. I don't know if you know this. There are churches within Metro Denver that do their Mass completely in Latin.
Yeah, there are a few of them out there that still do it, and
yes.
I don't remember, Jim. I think it was Vatican II, in which they changed that, and the whole idea behind it was exactly what you talked about, that it had created this barrier where the congregation would be sitting back in the pews in the rest of the church, and there was something separate going on, where the priest would have his back to you, you wouldn't get to see what was going on, you may not even understand the language, and so there was a question inside of the congregation of, why are you asking people to come in and spend an hour or more of their day once a week with you when they don't at the core understand what's going on many times? And so it was changed. The language of the people was changed as far as the presentation. But like you, I think that there are portions of Latin that are really, really beautiful inside the Mass, and I think it's a nice way to touch back through the past into the original origins of the church. I think that it's really nice. I had Latin in the Easter service I went to over the course of the weekend, just a little bit, but it was really nice to hear. And however, I mean, just a side note, Jim, you and me, because Jeff doesn't understand this, that sometimes when they were going through and they tried to take some of the old prayers and some of the old things and they tried to make them into English and things, they suck. So some of the old hymns, they used to be in Latin, and they try to change it to English. It's awful. It's really, really bad. You're like, who wrote this? This is horrible. You're trying to force, the meter, and you're trying to force the words, and it's dumb. Sometimes the Latin means a lot more, and I wish we'd do a little bit more Latin. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you understand Latin, you can go to medical school and understand a lot. I'll tell you that. So Latin is just. I'm happy the Catholic Church is trying to bring some of our old things that made the Catholic Church and incorporate them into the modern Mass without alienating the congregation.
Yeah.
And it's a balancing act. I don't know. I have attended a completely Latin Mass. It was a struggle. I will say it was a struggle. And I don't know whether I will do it again. It was on my bucket list, but I attended it. So it's for those that really enjoy that. It's a great experience. So I would encourage you, if you ever get a chance, to attend one, because especially, I think, Billy, you're Catholic, just to see what it's like. But, one thing about Pope Francis, I would say, he was in the camp, I don't know if I think it's called Liberation Theology. Yeah. And that was kind of from the point of view of bringing the Catholic Church into the 21st century or the 20th as well. And I think of a lot of things I was disappointed with him. You know what really bothered me?
What?
He could have been so much of a peacemaker concerning the Ukraine-Russian war. Yet he was not forefront on that. And I still don't understand why he was not. Why he did not get out there and say, let's get a peace. I don't understand it. He would criticize. And another thing that bothered me, anything that had to do with Trump, he was always inserting himself. As a Catholic, it bothered me he was doing that. Pope John Paul wasn't doing that. He was not getting involved with other governments' politics. And it just bothered me that he did that. And another thing is, I got to tell you, as a Catholic, it really bothered me. We had people like Nancy Pelosi and Biden, who are, quote, Catholics, and yet one of our core tenets is abortion is a sin. And they were like the strongest abortion advocates, and I could not understand why he was not getting on there and saying, listen, folks, if you're a Catholic, there are certain things you have to abide. And
Jim,
abortion is not one of them.
I appreciate that point. Great call. Jim's line will be open, 303-696-1971. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. We're taking lots of calls today. Pope Francis passing away early this morning. What's your take on his papacy? Where should the Catholic Church go now? Let's go to Nick in Denver. Good morning, Nick. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Morning.
Thanks for taking my call. I would like to see a pope who's middle-aged, somebody who's not real young but not real old. And that way he can kind of bridge the gap between the old and the new. As far as churches in general are concerned, and this is a general comment, I think the churches, the Christian churches, Protestant and Catholic, have done an absolutely horrible job of combating the morality crisis in this country. And I mean, all the stuff that's been going on with abortion and lesbianism and all that stuff, and all this stuff that's going on in the schools. They've done a terrible job of getting the message out. And I would like to see a much proactive church in the vein of how Jesus Christ conducted his sermons. He was mingling with the people all the time. He was not pontificating inside from a fancy building to the masses. He was mingling all the time with the masses. And that's what I'd like to see, a more active church.
Now, do you think that when you're talking about the more active church, you're looking at something that is more necessarily progressive or more conservative? And how do you think that would impact church attendance in America? Just, out of curiosity.
I think it needs to be a little bit more conservative, but they need to explain why. What are the weak spots in this progressivism, and why they believe in a more orthodox approach? But they need to get the message out, and they need to explain it, and they need to mingle with people.
Now, the one thing that I've got a criticism on, and again, being Roman Catholic myself, how does it hurt the church's message on being more conservative, given, and I'm talking the recent past, the last couple of decades, about, the children are the ones that are most important, to raise the children, keep them safe, except in these instances when we have priests molesting children and we move them around to different parishes. How does that, in your mind, erode the moral authority of the Catholic Church?
Well, it's been terrible, and the Catholic Church over the decades has done a terrible job in that area, and that's what's weakened their message, because people point out to the hypocrisy. You say one thing, but you do another, and they need to clean that mess up. If a priest does something bad, he needs to pay, or she. Well, I guess there's no female priest. Yeah. They need to pay the price.
And you're right, Nick, and I appreciate that, and I think you're right that part of the moral failure and the lack of leadership inside the church was because of the molestation scandal. As soon as you allow it inside, it's difficult to critique people on the outside.
You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
This is 710 KNUS.
It is 9 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Monday, April 21st, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned into the Jeff and Bill Show. News Talk 710 KNUS. The big breaking news this morning. Pope Francis, the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, has passed away at the age of 88. We're taking phone calls and texts from folks as they reflect upon his leadership of the Catholic Church and look forward to what the future of the Catholic Church may look like. Phone lines are open, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Speaking of the guy himself, he's going to be joining us here in just a second. Danny C., as he likes to go by, has my vote for future Pope, and that, Bill, is why I'm not allowed to be a cardinal. By the way, have I ever told you about the only time somebody looked me directly in the face and said, "Get behind me, Satan"?
Oh, yeah, when?
It was a cardinal. I was having dinner with a cardinal,
fantastic.
And I just said, "Hey, you got to choose a pope. What was that like?" Not allowed to ask that question.
Oh, no, they can't talk about it at all. No, they can't. They're not allowed to talk anything at all. Yeah, they can't talk about it at all.
Yeah, not at all. And hence why the "get behind me, Satan" type of thing. Because we were just having dinner. And I was like, man, that was cool, dude.
Yeah, can't talk about it. No, they can't discuss it at all. And there's even a phrase they're supposed to say before they vote. And, you know, as in, they basically, it's a piece of paper, they fill it out, they go up there and they have to make this declaration before they drop it into the box. And the votes are counted. Again, it's a blind ballot, but the votes are counted out loud. So it's live there. They don't sit there and go, well, round one, it's so many votes for here. They go, one, they read paper by paper by paper as they go through. And so you can see it develop. It's a really weird old process. But, yeah, I normally use that phrase, get behind me, Satan, when the people are asking me to sign stuff or do something outside the grocery stores. Because it is such a non sequitur. They're like, I have no idea what to do now. So it kind of ends the conversation.
Yeah, my Protestant self have found myself offending many of other religions over the years.
Oh, heck, you and me both, my friend, you and me both. And normally it's my own religion, is oddly enough.
The time I looked at my phone during a Shabbat dinner. Also, got in trouble for that one. Almost on the level of "get behind me, Satan." So.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic.
There's a Forrest Gump element to my life, and I find myself in unique situations, offending people of other religions. All right, now is time for Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
53 and sunny, beautiful morning in Denver. Expecting a high of 71 today. The 710 5-day forecast coming up. Our top story.
The statement from Cardinal Kevin Farrell reads in part, "Dearest brothers and sisters, with deep sorrow I must announce the death of our Holy Father, Francis."
Pope Francis is dead at the age of 88. Tributes are pouring in. Vice President J.D. Vance, who met with Francis at the Vatican a few hours before he died on Easter Sunday, said his heart goes out to everyone who loved him. Also reacting to the news, the White House posted on X, "Rest in peace, Pope Francis." The College of Cardinals will soon hold several meetings at the Vatican to start the process of selecting a new pope.
The step-by-step process that they go through to announce the death of a pope is kind of wild. I found this.
It is.
Okay, so the Chamberlain of the Holy Roman Church officially confirms the pope's death. Traditionally, he gently calls the pope's baptismal name 3 times. If there is no response, he declares the pope is dead. Once that happens, they destroy the fisherman's ring. The fisherman's ring, a signet used to seal official documents, is broken by the Chamberlain in the presence of the cardinals. This prevents the misuse and symbolizes the end of the Pope's authority. They then make a public announcement. Bells may toll and mourning customs begin, including the flying of flags at the half-staff in some places. A period of official mourning lasts 9 days, during which masses are offered for the repose of the Pope's soul. The body is prepared and displayed in St. Peter's Basilica for public veneration. Then the Pope is buried The Pope is traditionally buried in a crypt beneath St. Peter's Basilica. I've been down there. It's kind of wild.
Yeah,
There's lots of these different little rooms where the popes are buried. But it's not required that he be buried there. He can choose elsewhere. The Pope is usually placed in 3 coffins, wood, lead, and then another wooden coffin, each placed inside of each other. Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
During this time, all governance of the church is paused except for routine matters handled by the Chamberlain of the church there. No new appointments or major decisions can be made until a new pope is elected. Now, after at least 15 days, but no more than 20 days following the pope's death, the conclave will begin to elect a new pope. Only cardinals under 80 years old are eligible to vote. It's held in the Sistine Chapel under strict secrecy. Voting continues until a candidate receives 2/3 majority. After a successful vote, the elected cardinal is asked, do you accept your canonical election as supreme pontiff? If he says yes, he chooses his papal name.
Then he gets the hat.
Then the
It's
new
important.
pope is
And he
announced.
gets that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I've
that's a
often
big
heard
hat.
that upon the election, the new pope will weep, not out of joy, but out of almost remorse for the weight of the job moving forward.
Yeah. Now, Mark Crowley, who works here behind the scenes, said that the declaration of death may have actually happened, and he thinks that he found the feed coming out of the Vatican. Let's see. It's. You think that he's dead? Yeah, he's been officially declared.
So you're saying this is similar to what happens when someone loses their job in radio?
Yes, exactly. Very, very similar.
We call their name 3 times.
Yes. See if they respond.
See if they respond.
Who wears the hat?
Yes.
Craig Silverman. Craig Silverman. Craig
Yes,
Silverman.
exactly.
Oh, see ya, Craig.
Oh, man.
You've been
It's a big
removed
day.
from the
Yes.
office.
It's a big day, no doubt. 47 posting this morning that Jerome Powell needs to lower interest rates. He says he did it for Biden and Kamala Khan to try to get them elected. And he says that all the evidence shows now is the time to cut, but he's always late. The market has responded and dropped, but it is early. And the communist Klaus Schwab, Mr. UN, and leading the force to destroy the West, the WF, the EF, World Economic Forum. Schwab has completely resigned from the WEF. He founded it, and now he is gone. I wonder if he'll get a hat. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has reportedly shared more detailed military plans across a second group chat in the Signal app, and this time with members of his family. It's reported, multiple reports say Hegseth shared the military plans regarding the operation against the Houthis in Yemen. His brother, his lawyer, and his wife. Hegseth's brother and lawyer, though, both have jobs at the Department of Defense, although his wife does not. So now it's time for the drive-by media to do their job and just get rid of Hegseth again.
Well, I just find it interesting that he fired some people for leaking information, and then all of a sudden there's more information leaked.
Absolutely. So here's that from Hegseth. You're exactly right.
Hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much. Have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that. They'll be talking about that all day. A powerful judge in New Mexico caught harboring someone who works with MS-13 as they intimidate and try to influence. It may be Tren de Aragua, but they try to influence and intimidate law and politics, especially in the Southwest. But he's probably not a gang member. He's probably just another New Mexico Lobos fan. I'm sure he is a great guy. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland says it's time for Trump to put up or shut up in court. He recently returned from El Salvador, one of his favorite spots. Sat down with Kilmore Abrego Garcia. He says a federal judge says there's no evidence linking Garcia to MS-13. Here's Eddie Van Hollen.
I want to be very clear. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for the man's rights, his constitutional rights to due process. And the proper place to litigate that is in the courts. And the most recent federal district court judge that looked at this, Judge Zinnes, said that the administration had presented no evidence of his connection to MS-13 or, by the way, to any other criminal gang or terrorist activity.
Here's Tom Ullman.
What bothers me more than that is a U.S. Senator traveled to El Salvador on taxpayer dime to meet with an MS-13 gang member, public safety threat terrorist. I mean, in the meantime, the day before he traveled, an illegal alien was arrested for murder, were released to the streets rather than honoring an ICE detainer in his very own state. What concerns me is Van Hollen never went to the border the last 4 years on Joe Biden when he had a 600% increase in sex trafficking in women and children. You have a record number of no-inspected terrorists crossing that border.
That's what I'm talking about. If he cares so much about the American people and Marylanders, he would have been down at the border trying to do something about it. He's a fraud. He doesn't care. He hates America. Nuggets and the Clippers tonight in Lodo tip-off 8 o'clock. They're trying to up their lead. The Nuggets are 2-0. The Avalanche trying to do the same. The Avs take on the Stars tonight at 7:30 in North Texas. 50 in Lafayette, 50 in Littleton, 53 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. And you know what? Francis was awesome this morning.
40 years ago, would have ever bet that there was ever going to be a Jesuit pope ever.
Francis pontificating on Francis. I learned something. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Temperatures will be a bit more mild as we head into the new week here. Temperatures in Denver will make the low 70s today, near 70 tomorrow. Wednesday, lower 70s. Only a couple isolated late-day showers and isolated thunderstorms around today and tomorrow. However, for Wednesday through Friday, the chances of late-day shower and thunderstorm activity will be on the increase, and the end of the week and the weekend trending a little cooler. Weather sponsored by Colorado's Best Roofing, reminding you to protect your home from the harsh Colorado weather and schedule your free, no-obligation roof inspection today at roofingcolorado.com. That's roofingcolorado.com. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Dan Caplis is going to join us here in just a second. I want to talk to you about our friends at the Colorado Farm Bureau. Whether you pulled out your skis or snowmobiles this last winter, it was a great year for winter fun. But the snow means even more to Colorado agriculture, and I want you to know that our state's farmers and ranchers are doing their part to protect our future water resources. The people of Colorado agriculture always have conservation, efficiency, and reuse top of mind when it comes to water use. As the metro area continues to grow, Colorado Farm Bureau leads talks with state policymakers about preserving water for all areas of the state as pressure on the water system grows. It's going to take all of us to find a solution. My friends at the Colorado Farm Bureau are leaders in water conservation and water policy. They understand how to balance water for crops and water for families, and they're doing more with less. You can do your part. I recommend you join and become a member today. ColoradoFarmBureau.com. That's ColoradoFarmBureau.com to join the great people over there. All right, now, I don't get a vote in who could become the next pope, but I sure know who would do a great job of that, and that's Dan Caplis. Dan, you know him because of his outspoken faith. Very proud Catholic man, pro-life, pro-family, pro-faith, pro-America. You also know him as a great sponsor of this show. And I love his take on the life and times of Pope Francis and what he would like to see with regards to the future of the Catholic Church. Joining us now, the man himself, Danny C. Dan Caplis. Thanks for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, Dan, your thoughts on Pope Francis?
Yeah, you know, my big takeaway from Pope Francis is I love how he got back to the basics, right? I mean, just that core message of love and simplicity. I mean, he lived, as I understand it, I never met him, but he lived in a simple apartment. He lived modestly, but his whole core was love and getting back to that core teaching of Christ. And yeah, that I obviously love that, and that's my big takeaway.
Dan, you know, there's political debates as there are with every church. Within the Protestant church, we have just as many political debates as you guys do in the Catholic Church. How do you think he navigated the conservative liberal debates that were taking place?
You know, I'm not sure that he really tried to. And again, you know, that's not my expertise. I'm not a canon lawyer. I don't know all those ins and outs. But just as a guy, you know, just as a Catholic, my impression of Pope Francis was that he really wasn't trying to navigate all that. You know, he was just trying to carry the message that he wanted to carry. And he obviously knew that there were disagreements out there, and some major disagreements. I thought he did a really good job, guys, at cycling back and making it clear that while he was preaching, hey, let's make sure above all we love and make sure we communicate to everybody we may disagree with on these major issues that we love them, that I think he did a good job of circling back and making it clear, wait a second, no, you cannot be taking innocent human life. It is a foundational teaching of the church that abortion is wrong. And I think he did a great job of coming back to that and making that clear. I think some folks may have had a little doubt early because he was emphasizing different parts of teaching and doctrine, but I'm really glad he nailed that in the end.
That's the voice of Dan Caplis with Dan Caplis Law, a sponsor of this show and known in this community with a great reputation as a passionate man of faith. Dan, the calls we've gotten here today, for the most part, are that people are generally pretty satisfied with the direction of the Catholic Church, that they've cleaned up the abuse issues that have taken place, that they have stronger requirements now upon the bishops and upon the priests. They like the commitment to Catholic teachings with regards to human sexuality and the sanctity of human life. And they like the commitment that Pope Francis brought to the poor and serving those. And so generally the phone calls we've gotten today are, we're pretty happy with the direction of the Catholic Church. Your thoughts on the direction of the Church?
Yeah, the only problem that's causing me is getting a parking space at Mass. I mean, it has been really interesting to watch, guys, because obviously the church went through one of the most horrible things that it could go through, with the abuse scandal, and yet the church stepped up in many ways. The church dealt with that, I think, very honestly and very directly. And I know that there were patches in there where it wasn't handled well, and I'm not trying to gloss that over, but bringing us to where we are today, guys, it goes back to touching on the abuse scandal for a second. One thing I heard a smart person say that resonated with me, which is that, wait a second, people don't go to Mass because they think the priest is perfect. They go to Mass because they know Jesus Christ was perfect. They know God is perfect. And obviously, I spent 4 years in a Catholic seminary in my high school years, that the priests I know overall are true heroes. So that's part of what's fueling it, guys. But I got to tell you, it's on fire, because I go to different churches depending on where I'm in trial or whatever, and it's exploding all over the place with big numbers, just throngs of young people. And I think there are different explanations for that, but I love where it's headed. And I think you see something similar with Christianity in general in America recently. So, yeah, I'm very optimistic for the Catholic Church and beyond.
That's Dan Caplis. Dan, what do you attribute that turnaround? We've noticed it in the evangelical community, too, and you see it on social media. I was remarking yesterday, my entire social media fields were filled with people heading to church, taking pictures with their families, celebrating Easter. It feels like the culture's turning. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, my belief, I think it's the Holy Spirit. Why now? Well, I think part of that is Donald Trump getting a second term. I mean, there was such a determined effort to silence and cancel and punish outspoken Christians of all denominations and other people of faith that I think Donald Trump getting that second term and roaring out of the gate against censorship, which, cancel culture is just code for censorship, I think has really helped a lot of people feel freed and liberated and saying, I'm not going to put up with that blank again. So, I think there's been a big, coiled spring effect after Trump got that second term. But I believe at the core of it is the Holy Spirit.
That's Dan Caplis with Dan Caplis Law, great sponsor of this show. Dan, there's going to be a new pope picked here in the next few weeks. There's been, a great legacy of popes. Pope John Paul II, I think, was probably my favorite. What would you like to see in a pope moving forward?
Oh, you nailed it, Jeff. I would love to see another John Paul the Great. I mean, anybody who was at Mile High when the Pope was there, I happen to be at Grant Park in Chicago when he was there as well. I would love to see another Pope in that mold. Could be from any country, it could be from any background, but I'd love to see another Pope like that who just wants to transform the world. Personally, if the Pope is right on everything else, I'd love to see a Pope out of Africa because the Catholic Church is just in fuego in Africa. Tremendous growth. So I'm excited. I think there are great things ahead.
That's Dan Caplis Law, proud sponsor of Jeff and Bill Show. And, of course, just really good dude. We're really happy to have him here on the show this morning, that he made time for you, our audience, to talk about the passing of Pope Francis. Now, Dan, let's talk a little bit about possible choices. I'm not looking for names. I like the idea of someone coming out of Africa, but there is a guy that I've been talking about throughout the morning that is kind of the right-hand man of Pope Francis. He's an Italian. He has all the connections inside the Vatican and functions more or less as Pope Francis's Secretary of State. It's very similar to the relationship that John Paul had with Ratzinger, who became Benedict. I have a question. My question is, do you think we will see that line of succession like we did with John Paul to Benedict? So we would pick Pope Francis's right hand? Or would this be going outside the Vatican power hierarchy, which would be how Francis was picked in the first place? If you were a betting man in Vegas and I gave you 10 grand to put it down now, what do you think? Are we going with the internal politics guy, or do we step outside and make a choice, hopefully from Africa? What would you bet? Where do you put the money down?
Boy, Bill, you nailed the question perfectly, but I have so little knowledge. I have no inside knowledge whatsoever on this. So I am completely clueless. What I look at is that Pope Francis, by my math, appointed maybe 109 of the roughly 135 cardinals who are going to make this decision, because as you guys know, cardinals who are 80 or older don't get to vote. So it's a very small number here. He appointed most of them, but I don't think it works like American politics where it's that predictable. I mean, who of us could have seen John Paul the Great coming, right?
Yeah.
So, and I know this is going to sound naive to some people and like a duck to others. I truly believe in the Holy Spirit. And I just believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to overcome our own kind of individual political preferences, cliques, etc. Again, not trying to be naive, but I trust my instinct. I just feel like there's something great coming, and it's not necessarily going to follow those political lines.
You know what's so cool about that, and I appreciate that as a fellow Catholic, Dan, is you're listening to Dan Caplis Law, proud sponsorship of the program. Does some other radio stuff I've heard otherwhere in town here today, and it does some stuff in the afternoon, I'm just saying. But we appreciate his time with us this morning. What I like about that is taking it out of the politics. I think that for us being Catholics, this is a choice that weighs larger than personal preference. And I think, like when all of us go and we fill out our ballot, either paper or we walk into that voting booth, and we make the choice that we think is best for America, but it's also best for us, I think that what you touched on there with the Cardinals is it's more about a choice of what's best for the church and the congregation. I do believe that while the Cardinals do have a lot of personal feelings about it, that at the core, they are going to turn to the Holy Spirit and look at what direction is the Holy Spirit calling the church to go in this moment, and what is the best possible choice, because the worst thing in my mind for Cardinal to do would be to pick the person they want to be Pope, because that's not what they're called to do in the first place. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, that's very important, because I think it's important for all of us to remember, and I've only known a handful of cardinals, but it's important for us to remember that these are all people who gave up a lot to be priests in the beginning. They gave up sex, they gave up marriage, they gave up kids. Very devoted to God. I'm not saying any of us are perfect, right? But very devoted to God. And they know there aren't a bunch of spring chicken cardinals, right? They know they're going to see God soon, and they're going to be judged in part on this decision. I think they want to get it right. I think they want to be able to go to their judgment day saying, hey, I was a good and faithful servant. So that's why I'm really confident that in the end it's going to be a sincere decision from the large majority based on, hey, what does God want us to do?
That is great. That is Dan Caplis. You know him from Dan Caplis Law and the Dan Caplis Law text line. Great supporter of this show. Dan, you are known and have a great reputation in town as a man deeply committed to his faith. Thank you for taking time to spend with Jeff and Bill on this historic moment on the death of Pope Francis.
Really appreciate it. The only thing I want to add is I am on fire for my faith, but I'm deeply flawed, right? I'm a work in progress. Hopefully God is not finished with me yet. But thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, thank you so much, sir.
Great to hear from Dan Caplis. If you ever need help with any injury case, dancaplisLaw.com. Go there.
It's one of those that with Dan Caplis, if you have someone that you need his services, it's one of those things that when that email hits, when that comes over what used to be the fax machine or the papers are delivered, when they see that watermark on top, when they see that signature at the end of the email, the insurance company knows they have to pay attention because Dan comes correct. Some of the other guys, they know they can play with them, they can push them off, but they know that Dan dots his I's and crosses his T's. And so if you want your case to get the full and complete attention and for the insurance company or whoever you're dealing with to take you seriously, it's one stop, Dan Caplis Law.
That's exactly right. Speaking of great guys, we got another one coming up. Dustin Zvonek with Common Sense Institute's joining us. Big new report on homelessness and the impact of Mike Johnston's policies on the city of Denver. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Nobody does it better, in my mind, with the quality of research on Colorado policy decisions than the Common Sense Institute of Colorado.
You're right.
And on a wide variety of issues, everything from Tabor to crime to homelessness. And you know the name Dustin Zvonek, he's now a fellow with the Common Sense Institute, and he has a new report out, No Place to Call Home, the stark reality of homelessness in Colorado. He joins us now. I used to call him city council member, Dustin Zvonek. He was with Aurora City Council for a while. I now call him fellow Dustin Zvonek. Thanks for joining the Jeff and Bill Show.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
So,
I'm a homeless fellow of sorts, right? So that's the new
Yes,
title.
you are.
A homeless fella. Dustin, what does the new report tell us?
Well, I think the new report tells us,
in some ways,
nothing that
is too shocking,
right? I mean, it tells us that homeless has been up
over 90%
in Colorado between 2020 and 2024.
It tells us that in cities like
Denver, a city that has continued down the path of housing first, like so many other big cities across the country, that it's costing a whole lot of money, and the results are just not there. And that there's a better way and a potential for a much better way, not just for the state of Colorado and the Denver metro area and the approach that Aurora is looking to take, but frankly, a better way for the country to address the growing problem of homelessness.
Now, we're talking with Dustin Zvonek. He's with the Common Sense Institute. Dustin, progressives will go, well, step one to dealing with homelessness is get the people off the street. Then we'll deal with all of the mental health issues, drug addiction issues. But we need to at least get them off the street. Is this program delivering results from your perspective?
Yeah. So look, I think that the what you would call the emergency care, right, getting people off the streets. I mean, we have to. When I ran for council in 2021, that was at kind of the peak, right, coming out of the pandemic, where we saw encampments all over. I mean, obviously Denver and around the Capitol was, the area that got the most attention, but frankly, it was all over the city of Aurora. I remember going and meeting with business owners along the Havana corridor, along the Colfax corridor, and people were concerned about these encampments that were on the sides of highways or just beyond fence lines in neighborhoods. It was a real public safety issue. So this idea that we need to get people off the streets and have somewhere for them to go, sure, don't disagree with that. I think that the difference between housing first and a work first or treatment first philosophy is this. With housing first, and this is what they're doing in Denver, this is what they've done in San Francisco, is that they house people. And then they say, well, we have wraparound services, right? We have all the services available for you. But if you don't participate in them, that's okay. And there's no expectation that you do. And that is where we part paths between housing first, work first, and treatment first is with the alternative. What we are trying to push in Aurora was similar to what they do in Colorado Springs, which is saying, hey, look, you can come to the emergency shelter. And we're going to get you off the streets because we have to do that for the safety of our residents. But if you want to continue to be able to stay here and move into transitional house, you have to be willing to participate in services. And everybody's path to self-sufficiency through these services is going to look different. For some, it might just be some sort of job training and the ability to get back on their feet. And for others, it's going to be intensive addiction and recovery support, as well as, the job services. And we've seen programs work like this. Step Denver, Bridge House, Ready to Work. These are programs that have proven to work. The challenge has been that because the federal government has placed a preference on housing first, that's where the funds go from HUD. And so any program like Step Denver that requires sobriety, that requires work, that has expectations that you're going to participate in the programs, not just get free housing, they don't take federal funding because it could compromise the integrity of their program. And so with Aurora being the 52nd largest city in the country, our idea was to show that a big city with real urban challenges of homelessness could do something different and be successful.
That's Dustin Zvonek. He's a fellow with the Common Sense Institute. New report out titled No Place to Call Home, the Stark Reality of Homelessness in Colorado. Now, Mayor Mike Johnston's had some problems with some of these hotels, these homeless hotels that they bought, with regards to crime, with regards to tracking some of the funding. We talked about this on the show. There's an audit done. They didn't know where a good portion of some of this money went as well. Talk about some of the logistical challenges of creating a homeless or a housing first perspective where you're putting people into these types of hotels.
Yes, I think there's a number of problems with housing first, but specifically with what you're talking about, when you're putting people off the street into these hotels and essentially saying, you can stay here as long as you want. There is no expiration date. There's services available, but if you don't want to participate in them, you don't have to, which is why the participation rate is so low among the people who are there. So what you're essentially doing is now giving people a sheltered place to continue to abuse, whether with drugs and to avoid any consequences or any responsibility for them becoming self-sufficient. And this is where Mike Johnston, I think when he was elected mayor, he heard a lot from downtown business community saying, hey, we need to clean up downtown. We need to clean up the 16th Street area. And so he went out and acquired a whole bunch of hotels and moved all the homeless there. And now he's saying, we solved this homeless problem. I mean, frankly, it's like playing a game of hide the homeless, because you're not actually helping people move from their condition of being homeless to self-sufficiency, which should be the real metrics. Right? Whenever you do something, the idea should be that you're moving people from homelessness to self-sufficiency. And the other thing that we're trying to do in Aurora, and I think that this is the model to prove out, is that the operator of the facility is going to be an independent nonprofit that has the responsibility of going out and raising resources, not just taking government money, but going out and raising private philanthropy, because they are truly changing people's lives and helping them, become self-sufficient again.
That's Dustin Zvonek, former Rory City Council member, currently the Homeless Fellow at the Common Sense Institute, joining Jeff and Bill live by the Homeless Fellow. What they do is he works for the Institute, but they make him work in his car in the parking lot. They don't give him a plate. I'm kidding. He specializes in the homeless issues. And what I want to ask you, Dustin, is, okay, there is I would say, significant portion of Colorado that believes that what we have to do is provide housing for the person first, because that gives them stability, allows them somewhere to come home at night. And how could you possibly motivate somebody if you don't provide the roof over the head first? That it's actually cruel to make them go out and do anything like addiction services or work before getting that housing. Given the research that you've seen going through the Common Sense Institute, talk to us about what you would tell someone that says, no, Dustin, we've got to do the housing first. Look how wonderful that is turning out. What have you seen in your research that it refutes that approach and position?
Yeah, the research has shown, and the news stories from across the country have demonstrated time and again that any major city that has undertaken housing first as their homeless strategy has failed. Initially, the results are we have people off the street and you get people into housing. But if there is never any expectation of them participating in services, they don't change their conditions. And so these units that they live in, whether they be apartment buildings or renovated hotel buildings or any other structure that they build and say, this is where we're gonna keep our homeless people that aren't required to participate, they eventually just get run down. You see, incredible levels of addiction that never are addressed. And to the point when I was on council, I'd visit some of these housing first facilities. There were people that were continuing to go to the same place, and they had been there for 7 years. I had former colleagues on council that said, we've been coming to this Thanksgiving Day drive to the same homeless shelter for the past 7 years. We're getting to know these people because they've been here every single year. They're not moving people on a structured path to self-sufficiency. And that's what, we're trying to do in Aurora. And this is what I appreciate so much about Common Sense Institute, is that right now there is a whole lot of data on housing first, because it's been the policy preference of the federal government for nearly 20 years. Lots of big cities have attempted to use it. It's been an abject failure everywhere it's been attempted to use. On the work first model, or treatment first, there are some programs out there. Bridge House, as I mentioned, it's ready to work in Aurora. Step Denver, these are all smaller programs. they have measurable success of helping people who were unhoused or homeless become self-sufficient. Now, there isn't as much data because there hasn't been as much resources put behind these models since the Obama administration made housing first the preference of the federal government. And so what I think our ask would be, and I think this is what the Common Sense Institute study points to, is that the federal government ought to allow states and local governments to be laboratories of democracy and free up those federal funds to allow other types of philosophies around how to address homelessness to actually compete with, so that we can have a better contrast with housing first. And look, I know that if that were to happen in years to come, Common Sense Institute is going to continue to hold every city and local government's feet to the fire and ensure that the data backs up what they're suggesting will be the outcome.
That's Dustin Zvonek, the homeless fellow at the Common Sense Institute. And the phrase you need to put a pin on in our conversation this morning with Dustin is structured path to self-sufficiency. That, in my mind, is the failure of the Obama administration and all the programs that go with housing first, because they're not looking at a path to self-sufficiency. They assume once you have the house, that's the motivation to be self-sufficient. There's no path. I have experience in my own life where a really good friend of mine had a brother who was a functional alcoholic and eventually got into just an abusive alcoholic and was out on the streets and eventually got a place to stay, dabbled in some drugs as well, and he was part of a housing first model. The only reason he agreed to join the housing first model was because it allowed him to feed his addiction without any expectations to change behavior or become self-sufficient. It was just he was trading the tent on the street for the bed in the facility. That's it. That was the only change. Nothing else was required of him, so it was easy. He just didn't get rained on all the time, but he didn't have to change anything himself. Structured path to self-sufficiency. That's going to be the key.
Yeah, that's right. That story is exactly the type of story that I heard so many times as both a candidate and as a city councilman from people who work in this space. And look, I want to be clear. There are some people who are homeless and on our streets that because of maybe significant mental health issues, they are not going to ever find or have the ability to be self-reliant, right? That these are people who at one time in our country's history were in institutions, and I'm not suggesting we go back there, but we need to have something for them. These are the people who end up in our prisons and, are probably the most danger to themselves and to others in our communities. There's a big chunk of people in the middle, and these are the people you really find in the encampments who, maybe it's a 50-something-year-old veteran who struggled with depression or anxiety, and because of the stigma of that, never sought treatment. And then alcoholism became something else, which became something else. And now they've been on so many various synthetic opioids that they present as being schizophrenic. And so housing first advocates would say, we just need to put them in a house because they can never be self-sufficient. I don't believe that. I believe that if we can help people on their path to self-sufficiency, that we can help them become sober, that we can help them get the job skills and training they need, and we can help them to become self-sufficient and live a life of meaning. And I think that should be what we measure the success of any sort of homeless strategy that is being run by, whether it's nonprofits or government or in public-private partnerships, is that how many people are we moving to where they can have a life of fulfillment, not just by the number of meals provided or the number of beds provided on a cold night.
That's Dustin Zvonek. He's a fellow with the Common Sense Institute. New study out, No Place to Call Home, the stark reality of homelessness in Colorado. Go check it out. Get into these details. This is important. Remember, John Hickenlooper planning to end homelessness within 10 years back in 2006. These are the policies that our elected officials are trying to press forward. They're not working. They've got the data to back it up. CommonSenseInstituteUS.org is the website. CommonSenseInstituteUS.org. Dustin Zvonek, thank you for taking time to join the Jeff and Bill Show today.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
We'll continue. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Well, Pope Francis passing away. We talked with Catholics as they reflected upon his papacy. And who's next to be Pope? Also, has the Housing First homeless model failed? We talked with the Common Sense Institute. That was all at 710knus.com if you want to download the podcast. By the way, Bill, we got to talk with Chris Murray, Dan Caplis, Dustin Zvonek today.
Dude, it's amazing. Like rock stars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we're not worthy. We're not worthy to do the whole.
We get to hang out with people way smarter than us.
Way smarter. It is
Go
so
to
nice.
710knus.com to download the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
This is 710